today I'll give you an overview of the story that's coming ahead in Surah Al-Kahf, which is the story of Musa and Khidr alayhim salam. And the person of Khidr is not mentioned by name in the Qur'an. That's the opinion of most mufassirun. It's a mysterious figure. There have been some interesting stories made up about Khidr alayhi salam in Islamic history. Some pretty cute ones, like this guy who just went to a town and he didn't know anybody there, and he just decided to spend the night in the masjid, and they had kicked everybody out of the masjid, and they asked him to leave too, and he said, okay, I'm leaving in a minute, but he didn't realize, and he passed out, and he woke up, and he's the only one inside the masjid, and this guy brought him fresh food, and he's like, nobody's supposed to be here right now. And he goes, yes, you're right, but I came here to take care of you, and he just gives him food, and he disappears in a poof. And فَعَلِمْتُ أَنَّهُ خِضْر عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامُ. So I knew that was Khidr. Cool. So what I want to share with you first is the beautiful placement of the story from an Imani perspective, from a Hikmatul Qur'an perspective, wisdom of Qur'an perspective. We went through an entire passage, or actually two passages that mirrored each other. Right? One with an opening statement, one with a closing statement. And in those two passages, the point that's been reinforced over and over again is Allah has a plan for everything. Down to Allah has a plan for every plant, all the way to Allah has a plan for every nation. Right? And in between, all human beings that live this life, when they stand before Allah, they're going to know that every little thing and big thing was accounted for. Nothing went unnoticed by Allah. Allah's justice is completely perfect and absolute, right? So Allah's planning and His justice and His knowledge has been established in a very thorough way in the two passages that we went through just now. But the problem for most human beings that have a faith problem is actually a problem of questioning why things happen in life. That's really where the problem lies. Why is bad stuff happening to me or anyone else in this world? As a matter of fact, the number one argument that any typical, someone towards it that has atheistic tendencies or just aggression towards God in general, the first things they're going to talk about is either their personal problems or problems in the world. If there is a God, how come this, and this happens? How come this bad stuff happens? And there's a list of bad stuff, right? So that is certainly a big problem to deal with. Now the way Allah deals with it in this surah is very beautiful. First of all, if you notice, the previous passage, or the two passages, were all about, first of all, briefly about Allah's planning in this world, but really primarily highlighting what is going to last, and what is the perfect justice of Allah in the akhirah. This world is not about perfect justice, the next world is, right? And yet Allah Azza wa Jal is going to bring everything back in order, everything is going to be balanced out. But you have to believe in the unseen for that. You can't just believe in the seen world, you have to believe in the unseen. I would even argue, from whatever I've been able to understand, even in the Fatiha, it's actually Allah's perfection is part of Allah's perfection is actually in the creation of an afterlife. That's a necessary corollary of the perfection of Allah, of His absolute justice. Because without the afterlife, you have a person in this world who commits 100 murders, right? And how do they compensate it? The most you're going to do is kill them once. They can't pay for 100 lives. And it could just be that those 100 lives were dependents on other people. So they didn't just affect 100 lives, they affected 100 families, maybe 100 communities. There's no way this one person can pay damages in this world for what they may have done to 100 people. That's impossible. Forget 100, not even 2 people. Maybe not even one person. Even if you take an eye for an eye, that may not still be perfect justice. Right? This guy is a loner, nobody depends on him, nobody knows him, and the one he killed is the head of a household, or a mother of children, or whatever. He ruined several lives. The damage has far more repercussions. So the idea of getting absolute justice in this life is actually, it's not possible. It isn't possible. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah would even go as far as to say, if somebody slapped you and you slapped them back, how do you know your slap didn't hurt them more? So when he talked about the one being muqtasid, the one, because Allah says, minhum zalimun nafsihi wa minhum muqtasid, the one who's fair, absolutely fair. He said even absolute fairness technically can't exist. You could try your best, but how do you know you're not crossing a line? How do you know your punch wasn't harder than the punch that was thrown at you, kind of thing, So the safer route for you is to forgive. That's what he would argue. But look, what does the afterlife do? Every debit is credited. Every credit is debited. Anything somebody got away with, they didn't get away with it. Allah recorded it. لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها. There's no way out. It's all going to be paid for. And if you don't believe that, then it's going to be hard to believe in a God that's fair. When you only have this life. When that's all there is. And we, subhanAllah, in our faith, we have this reliance on Allah's mercy and a reliance on Allah's justice, a dependence on Allah's justice. Like, for ourselves, we're hoping for Allah's mercy. But when we see crime in the world, and we see injustice in the world, we actually lean on Allah's justice. Like, these people won't get away with what they did. And that's why Allah gives that as a consolation in the Qur'an. أَمْ حَسِبَ الَّذِينَ اجْتَرَحُوا السَّيِّئَاتِ or أَمْ حَسِبَ الَّذِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ السَّيِّئَاتِ أَنْ يَسْبِقُونَ. Did people think the ones that have done crimes against us or committed evil deeds, that they got ahead of us? That they got away? سَاءَ مَا يَحْكُمُونَ. What a horrible decision they made. This was actually said to the Muslims when they were being tortured. And the cry comes, how can they get away with what they're doing to us? In Mecca, how could they get away with that? And then those ayat came. You think they just got away with it? No. They didn't get away with it. They're not paying for it now, doesn't mean they're not going to pay for it, right? That's Allah's perfect justice is directly associated in the Qur'an with Allah Azza wa Jalla's creation of the akhirah, the afterlife. And so I wanted to highlight first that point because the last two passages that I ran through with you were just about that, just establishing that concept that the justice of Allah is perfect. But that is the akhirah, it's the unseen. And it's like there's a curtain between us and the unseen. Like all we can see is this world. We don't see the unseen. We don't see the akhirah, we don't see the angels. We don't see the behind the scenes source code of Allah's design, Allah's plans, right? What's going to happen in this story is basically for a few instances, Allah is going to lift the curtain a little bit and you can get a peek at what's going on behind the scenes. So something's going to look really bad, like if you know the story of Musa and Khidr, he goes on a journey to learn, which we'll talk about in some depth. But when he goes on this journey to learn, alayhi salam, the first thing he's told is, look, the lessons I want to teach you, you don't have patience to deal with. You just don't have the patience. لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. That's the first assessment of his teacher, by the way, that your barrier to learning is your impatience. That's his first assessment. By the way, sabr isn't just patience, it's also not being able to remain consistent. So for a student, one of the biggest dangers, even if there's a student as great as Musa alayhi salam, the danger is not being able to be consistent. And also not being patient. Those two things together, right? So if that's a danger for him, that's certainly a danger for you and me. In our barriers to learning. Anyway, so he says, you're not going to be able to be patient with me. Now, why is he not being patient? Because he sees things he can't tolerate. He sees basically, in two cases, injustices. And in towards others. And in the third case, injustice towards himself. Right? In two cases, it's either, this ship that's being wrecked, or a child that's been killed. And in the third case, he did all this work and he didn't get compensated. We could have just gotten paid at least, we're starving. Right? On a side note, by the way, part of the beautiful perfection of the surah and the symmetry of the story is that it began with him being hungry and asking, where's the fish? We gotta eat. And that's where trouble began. That's when his student got in trouble with him. Okay? And the story ends when they do hard work and they wanted to eat, right? And yastata'ama ahlaha. They wanted to eat food. And he says, we could have gotten paid. Now, why would they want to get paid? It's obvious in the ayah, because they wanted to eat food. And he's like, that's it, you're expelled from this university. And he's, so where it began is kind of where it ended, with hunger of Musa alayhi salam. I thought it was adorable. But anyway. But anyhow, in all three of these stories, then Allah lifts the curtain. And He shows a little bit of a peek of the unseen. So you know that justice isn't just waiting until the Day of Judgment. There is justice happening in this world as well. There are things that are fully going to be compensated, but in a limited sense, Allah is still executing justice every single day in this world, in ways you cannot directly understand. So even the death of a child, which you might think is a horrible thing, there's more at play. Even something like a ship being damaged, there's more at play. You didn't get paid, yes, that's unfair, but there's a bigger thing at play here. There's a larger problem here. Okay? Because by the way, if they did get paid, then they'd have to get paid from the money that's hidden inside the, underground. which means that the location of those assets would be exposed to a very greedy nation. Right? So they couldn't get paid. Even though fairness would suggest that you could take some money out of there because you're the one protecting it or you're the one building that wall, they couldn't do that. Nobody else is going to pay them. Actually, they were providing the service to those two boys, not anybody else, right? Anyhow, so that's a little bit of kind of the overview of the story. Now I want to show you the organization of the story, just some things. There are a few passages in this story. The first of those passages, I'll run through the translation quickly. Don't worry about my notes. They don't make any sense to any normal human being. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ When Musa said to his young lad, Fata. Fata means young man. Fata is the same origin as the word fatwa. What does fatwa mean? What does fatwa mean? Legal verdict? Legal ruling, right? Actually, fata yaftu means to pass a judgment. And fata means when you're at the age where you're responsible for the judgments you pass, for the decisions you make. You know, when you're no longer a minor in the legal sense, you're an adult now, you may be tried as an adult, that's when you're called a fata. That's why fata and fatwa are from the same origin. Same way when girls are of the age where their decision is their own, which means they're ready to get married, they're called fatayat. That's when they're called fatayat, okay? Anyhow, so when Musa alayhi salam said to his fata, La abrahu, you did la ma bariha, madama, mazala. What is ma bariha? I don't remember. Okay, good, you don't remember either. We'll forget together. You'll remind me tomorrow, or one day. La abrahu hatta abluga majma' al-bahrain. I'll translate, I will not abrah until I reach, anyone know? Nobody remembers abrah? I'll keep going. La abrahu actually means I'll keep going. Hatta abluga majma' al-bahrain, until I reach the union place. Majma', by the way, a dharf, right? Maf'alun wa maf'ilun wa maf'alatun. The place of the union of the two seas. Aw amdiya huqba, or I'll spend lifetimes going. So he's showing his commitment to I need to find this place where the two waters meet, the two bahr meet. فَلَمَا بَلَغَ, then when they finally reached it, both of them reached it. مَجْمَعَ بَيْنِهِمَا, the union between the two of them, between the two seas. نَسِيَا حُوتَهُمَا, both of them forgot their fish. Allah is not saying that the young man forgot the fish. Allah is saying nasiya. Huwa nasiyahuma. Nasiya. They're both responsible for forgetting the fish. فَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ سَرَبًا, and it took its path. The fish took its path in the sea. Sarab comes from the word sarab. Sarab is a little bit different from sharab. Sharab is drink. Sarab is the image of a drink, meaning a mirage. It looked unreal. فِي الْبَحْرِ سَرَبًا, in a way that was unreal. Like it didn't, is that really happening? I must be tired. And you just kind of pass out. Because this half-eaten ship, or fish rather, is jumping off ship and then jet skiing down the sea. And it's leaving a wake too. That's called, Saraba is also the wake that it leaves behind. So that's what happened. فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَ, I'm missing a fa. فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَ قَالَ لِفَتَاهُ آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا. When they passed by it, and they've already crossed it. When they've crossed it, he says to his young man, his intern basically, who's also considered a prophet according to Israelite tradition, right? آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا, bring us our lunch. لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. We've met with quite a bit of exhaustion because of this journey of ours. Interestingly, the word nasab means exhaustion. It's the most exhausting of the three status also. It's like so many kinds of nasab, right? But anyway, it's well named, So we've been hit with quite a bit of exhaustion because of this journey. So this journey of ours. So let's eat some fish. قال أرأيت إذا وينا إلى الصخرة. Did you also see when so the student starts by saying, by the way, didn't you see that too? أرأيت إذا وينا إلى الصخرة. When we were taking some refuge near that cave, because the ocean was getting a little turbulent, so we went towards that rock, remember? Maybe we'd get some shelter for a little while. فَإِنِّي نَسِيتُ الْحُوتِ. Then at that time, because things were so crazy at the time, I kind of forgot the fish. وَمَا أَنْسَانِهُ إِلَّا شَيْطَانًا أَذْكُرًا. And he notices that maybe Musa is getting upset, so he goes, no. None but shaitan made me forget. It was nothing but shaitan. It wasn't me. Shaitan got me. let's hate shaitan together. That kind of thing. And أذكر for mentioning it. وَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ. Now that I do remember it though, he did take quite a weird way into the sea. وَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ عَجَبًا. The story, the backstory is, I'm not completely convinced of the backstory, but anyway, the story is that Musa alayhi salam made a statement about how knowledgeable he is on the earth, like he's perhaps the most knowledgeable human being on the earth, and Allah said there's someone who knows more than you, and you need to go learn from him. And he will meet him where the two oceans meet. So he gets determined to learn now, and grabs this assistant, and they go out to sea to find this person that Allah has instructed him to meet. Okay? Yeah. Say that again? Yeah, it's Hawaii. No, it's not Hawaii. No, it's closer to New Jersey. Thank God we don't know where this place is. Thank Allah we don't know where this place is. You know what would happen if we knew where this place is? There'd be a bunch of Pakistani aunties out there looking for Khidr. And then just, punk over my child or something. Thank Allah that we don't know where this place is. Okay? There's a reason some things are kept a mystery in the Qur'an. Like, for example, the wall of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. For God's sake, it's not the wall of China. Can you just... God. We don't know, and that's okay. It's okay. And by the way, I should remind you of something that perhaps this wasn't your year when I started Surah Al-Kahf, so I should remind you of this. The first story in this surah is the people of the cave. And the great crime committed with that story is that people asked irrelevant questions. How long did they stay? How many were they? Who cares? That's not the point. You should learn to say, Allahu Rabbi, قُلْ رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ بِعِدَّتِهِمْ Allahu أَعْلَمُ بِمَا لَبِثُوا. Allah knows better, Allah knows better, Allah knows better. He hammered that in the first story. And then He tested you and me with 3 more stories in this surah. In all of them, you have to ask, wait, when did this happen? Who, what, where, what location? What year? Who's this young man? You're going to ask questions about Dhul Qarnayn. Same kinds of questions. You're going to ask questions about Musa and Khidr. Even the 2 gardeners. Where are these gardens? Who are they? Are they at the time of the Prophet or before? Like Allah first taught you, here's how I want you to learn stories. Learn to not ask too many questions. By the way, in this story, the teacher is going to say what? Don't be asking too many questions. And I'm not going to tell you the whole story. حَتَّى أُحْدِثَ لَكَ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا Until I mention a little bit to you. Think about the little bit I tell you, don't worry about anything else. It's actually Allah's way of telling the story. It's not just the story itself. Right? Which is why the outside, this is the background, this is where they went, did they go by land or sea? Irrelevant. Yeah? Fantastic question. Excellent question. How do we draw the line between seeking knowledge, because that's what we're trying to do, and asking too many questions? You can ask as many questions as you want. Learn to ask the right questions, and you can ask as many questions as you want. The thing is not you don't have the right to ask questions. The thing is, what is the thought process that leads you to your question? You're learning the story of Yusuf. Hey, what's the minister's wife's name? I mean, that scandalous lady, what's her name? Well, so your question didn't arise from something Allah made you curious about. What Allah emphasizes, you ask about. What Allah de-emphasizes, you learn to de-emphasize. You see? Ratib al-Nabulsi, the way he taught this to me, even though I've taught this in the beginning of Surah Al-Kahf, I'll repeat it for you guys, because it's important for you guys. There's the saying in Arabic, I don't know if you guys learned it, خُذْ مَا طَفَّلَكَ. Did you learn that one? Okay, take what's in front of you. Just take what's in front of you. If you trust your teacher, then you'll focus on what he's giving you, not what he's not giving you. What happens is, Ustad Adam is teaching you one day, a long time ago, about what's a mudaf and what's a mudaf ilayh. But are there some cases, I know you're teaching me this right now, but are there exceptions that you haven't told us about that perhaps clearly in your experience it isn't the time to discuss, but I feel that you really should, because I have curiosities beyond what you're telling me. So Sheikh Latif Nabulsi gave this epic story, man. So good. He goes, there's this guy, he's like successful in business, right? And he's made hundreds of millions. And he decides after making all this money that he just wants to teach young people entrepreneurship. He's going to teach business. He's not going into the teaching profession because he needs the money. He just wants to do it as a benefit to young people, the next generation. So he goes to business school and teaches. By the way, if you have a professor like that, take his class. If you have a guy that's been a business professor for 30 years, as opposed to a guy that left the business world and came to be a professor, go to the guy that's left the business world and come and be a professor. Because they give you real world knowledge, right? Non-textbook knowledge. So he goes and teaches this class, and he wants to teach students by way of example. So he says, you know, guys, if there's this man wants to start a business. First, he did a lot of research into his product and the location where he wants to open his retail establishment. He did a lot of research about pricing and rent versus buying. He looked at the tax strategy. He looked at the location. He looked at the kind of advertising and branding and the colors that he should be looking at. He looked at inventory and income versus expenses. How much should be he's spending in the first quarter, the second quarter? What were his projections for the first year? He makes this whole story up about this guy who's starting his business. And he put it in the form of a story. Why? Because then students can remember it easier. If you make a list of things, right, then it's harder to remember. If you put it in a story, like the words Arab said are feminine, it's just easier to remember, right? So he makes this amazing story and he tells it in class and everybody's like taking notes, and one student raises his hand and says, so what color shirt does he wear every day? And the professor's just looking at him like, did you really just ask me this? And another student raises his hand. Yeah, I was less curious about the shirt, but his socks really concerned me. What kind of socks does he wear? And the professor is baffled. And he goes home and he's so upset. And his wife asks him, what happened? And he says, you know that story I wrote? She goes, yeah, how'd it go? Well, I did a great job, but here are the questions that came forward. Can you believe what they were arguing about? How idiotic can they get? And Sheikh Ratib tells this story, and then he says, now read, سَيَقُولُونَ ثَلَاثَةٌ رَابِعُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ وَيَقُولُونَ خَمْسَةٌ سَادِسُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ رَجْمًا بِالْغَيْبِ وَيَقُولُونَ سَبْعَةٌ وَثَامِنُهُمْ كَلْبُهُم قُلْ رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ. And I was like, oh, Allah is so offended by the stupidity of this argument that He records the whole thing. Can you believe what they're arguing about? What I just told you and what you're discussing? That's what I mean by asking the right questions. Allah wants you to think about certain things, but we want to think about all the things He doesn't want us to think about. What are the other brothers' names in the story of Yusuf? Why? Why? Allah didn't tell you. What about his mom? I didn't read anything about his mom. I want to know about his mom. Yes, I'm sure you want to know about his mom. But Allah wants you to think about his dad. Can you just pay attention and just worry about the dad? If you want to worry about the mom, read the story of Musa. You can worry about the mom. And then what about his dad? Is that clear? Like, as one of the most beneficial things you'll learn in the study of Qur'an is what kinds of questions to ask, how to think. Not every curiosity is healthy. The Qur'an, it keeps asking you to think. Because thought process gives you direction. Without thought process, you don't have direction. Your questions go in every direction. And unfortunately, this is the unfortunate thing, you must maintain commitment to your thought process when you study Islam. You have to be committed. You know why? Because you're going to read a lot of books and you're going to read a lot of tafsirs where they're not committed to the same thought process. So there's going to be 6 pages on what color the dog was in the story of the cave in classical tafsir. And did he have spots or not? And what his name was. And it's going to be a classical text. And you're going to say, I'm reading the tafsir of Fulan ibn Fulan. I have ijaza in it. Yes, you do. That's great. You can read a lot of stuff, but you have to maintain your thought process. And you have to identify what's critical and what's not. You see? That's not going to be done for you, unfortunately. You have to develop that yourself. And to me, the best way to develop it is commitment to Qur'an. Commitment to the primary text. The more you ponder over Qur'an and you look at how Allah speaks and what He emphasizes, it just teaches you what to emphasize and what to let go of. What is priority and what isn't. Yeah. That's right. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'an. Anyhow, so now Musa alayhi salam is going to go on this journey. In this first passage, you can see it, right? It's small, but you can see it. Let me make it a little bigger. So we were at, I forgot to fish, and it took a weird path. قَالَ ذَلِكَ مَا كُنَّا نَبْغِي. This is what we were looking for all along. This is what we were pursuing. فَارْتَدَّا. Then they retraced, went back. عَلَى أَثَارِهِمَا. On the remnants, meaning the path they had left behind. Athar can also mean footsteps, but it can be figurative also, meaning the path we took, we're going to go back. Qasasa, step by step, milestone by milestone. Okay. Qasas means one more thing. Story, which is going to play a role later on, how beautifully this word is going to, I won't tell you. Okay. فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. Then they both found one of our servants. عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. A Pendu translation would be a slave from our slaves. One of our slaves. One of our servants. Okay. آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا. We had given him a special rahmah, a special love and care that comes from us. وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِنْ لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. And we had taught him مِنْ لَدُنَّا, from our special behalf, especially from us, from our internal vaults, some knowledge. You notice that the word inda and then ladun are both used here, right? The word ladun is actually far more private than inda. If something is indaka, it's with you, then it's in your possession, but it may not be secret. But if something is min ladunka, then you went into some vault somewhere, pulled it out, and then gave it. Okay? So now Allah is already highlighting that His rahmah is more accessible, but the kind of knowledge He gave to this man that he's going to learn from is actually from some special secret place. It's not just any knowledge that this man has been taught. عَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. Got it? Now, this passage, if you notice, the first ayah was about Musa's commitment to reach his destination. Isn't it? Even if I spend ages. And the last ayah is actually about him reaching his destination. It actually fulfills the first ayah. If you notice the second ayah, فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ مَجْمَعَ بَيْنِهِمَا نَسِيَ حُوتَهُمَا. They passed over the milestone they were supposed to. When they reached it, they crossed over it. They didn't stay there. And they forgot all about it. Then they remembered, and what did they do? What did they do once they remembered? Retrace their steps. And in the second last ayah, this is what we were looking for, so they retraced their steps. So it corresponds, the second and the second last correspond to each other. And in the middle, there are two weaknesses. One weakness is exhaustion that Musa feels, and the other is forgetfulness. Right? The two things that led to a lapse in the journey, forgetfulness and exhaustion. By the way, those are the two things that can disrupt learning, aren't they? Ironically. You're fatigued. You're tired. You don't want to study anymore. Come on, another exam. Is Sarf over yet? No? God. It's not over yet? Just tired of it. This irregular Sarf is making me into an irregular person. And then you start forgetting. You start forgetting. By the way, forgetting is of two kinds. Forgetting like, I can't remember, and forgetting as in, forget it. Who cares? And both meanings are found in the Qur'an. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Don't be like those who forgot Allah. Not like I can't remember who Allah is, but what? Who cares? Like this disregard. So nisyan is used in the meaning of disregard also. كَمَا نَسِيتُمْ لِقَاءَ الْيَوْمَ نَنْسَاكُمْ كَمَا نَسِيتُمْ لِقَاءَ يَوْمِكُمْ هَذَا. Today we have, Allah says, today we have forgotten you the way you forgot this day, or meaning of this day. But Allah never forgets. Allah has perfect memory. That meaning, the word nasiya there doesn't mean forget as in memory, it means forget as in what? Disregard. Today we disregard you. You don't mean anything now. كَمَا نَسِيتُمْ لِقَاءَ يَوْمِكُمْ هَذَا. Okay? These are the barriers to learning. Anyway, this is the first passage. Then he sees Musa alayhi salam. قال له Musa. Musa alayhi salam speaks to him. هل أتبعك? Can I follow you? The roles have been reversed. Just now in the first passage, Musa had a student. He was giving him instructions. Now all of a sudden he has a teacher and he wants to be the student. And he says, can I follow you? على أن تعلمني, based on what you taught me. Or based on the idea that you may teach me. مما علمت رشدا, from whatever you've been taught in terms of uprightness, in the right guidance. قال إنك I'm going through it so I can show you the overview. And we'll go into detail. قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا. He said, no doubt about it, you're not going to be capable of patience with me. Now, the idea here is there's innaka. Innaka means emphasis, tawqeed, certainty, but they're meeting for the first time. How do you meet someone for the first time? He says, can I learn from you? And he sizes him up in 1 minute and goes, yeah, not you. You can't handle it. This is basira. This is also teaching experience. Some teachers can size you up in a minute. There's one of those teachers. He could tell your temperament. He didn't say, I don't know if you have the intellectual capacity, or you're not a good student, or you won't be able to understand. No. I think your problem is going to be what? Patient. Maybe even the way in which he said, hey, could you teach me, please? Oh, I see. Wisdom dictates that not just you pay attention to what's being said, but how it's being said. And he could immediately tell, the problem here is going to be patience. And it's not going to be patience with what I teach you. It's going to be patience with me. Ma'iyah. مع ما علمتك or مع ما أعلمك. You're not going to be impatient with the lessons I give you. You're going to be impatient with me, myself. You're going to lose it with me. I can already tell. Musa alayhi salam, and he doesn't stop there, and he goes, وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ? And how are you going to have patience anyway? عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. Over things you haven't encompassed, you haven't grasped full awareness of. In other words, he's already letting him know, we're going to do stuff, and you're not going to have the full story. And you're the kind of guy, if you don't know the full story, it makes you really upset. Because you need to understand fully. And if you don't understand fully, it's not justified to you, so you get upset. So in these two ayat, there are two different kinds of impatience highlighted. One impatience is with the teacher, the other impatience is with the lesson. You notice that? لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا is with the teacher. مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا is with the lesson. There's two different kinds of impatience. And one is about the way the teacher decides to hold back or tell or do. Why are you doing this? How come you're doing that? The second is actually about how come we aren't being given all the information? How come this course of action is being taken? I don't understand the logic behind it. You know, one of the things, as an Arabic teacher I can tell you, in our curriculum, one of the things you have to develop for students is tawakkul not only in Allah, but also in the teacher that says, trust me, right now you're learning 4 properties of the ism. I know that makes no sense to you right now. This doesn't even seem like Arabic right now. But just trust me, just give me 3 days, give me 4 days. When we get to fragments, which you don't know what that is yet, it'll all make sense. But for now, you must take the steps I'm telling you. But I came here to learn Arabic, and I don't even know how to order a shawarma yet. And they're telling me about flexibility and light and heavy. Yeah. You got to trust. You have to give yourself to the teacher, and you also have to give yourself to basically a path, a curriculum. And a curriculum is actually about not giving you all the information. It's giving you the information you need today. Holding back information that you're not ready for today. And even if it was given to you, you wouldn't keep it. You'd throw up. You wouldn't be able to retain it. You have to be able to absorb it. And once you absorb it and you're ready for it, then some more, then some more, then some more. You know, it's often described, education is, one of the words used for it in Arabic is tarbiyah, which is the same word used for cultivating a plant. A plant needs water over the course of a year, but imagine the amount of water it needs over the entire course of a year dumped on it at once. It's not how it happens. You have to give a little bit of water, let it absorb, let it grow a little, then some more, then some more. And some plants are stupid. They say, give me all of it now. And the gardener says, no. I asked for more and they didn't give me. He didn't even flood me. No, he didn't. You're not going to be patient because you're going to ask too many questions. You want to know the whole thing. It's not time yet. Just trust me. You know. So this is the one of the main essences of the story. So Musa alayhi salam says, okay, you know what? I can see that I have that problem. He's not even saying no. What are you talking about? Me? Sabr? I am sabr. No. Qala satajiduni sabira? No. Satajiduni insha'Allah sabir. Okay, if Allah wills, with Allah's divine intervention, I think I can pull this off. I recognize I have a sabr problem, and the fact that he recognizes that this is not entirely within his capability is because he uses what words? Insha'Allah. Insha'Allah. But I can tell you one thing. وَلَا أَعْصِي لَكَ أَمْرًا. He doesn't say, وَإِنْشَاءَ اللَّهِ لَا أَعْصِي لَكَ أَمْرًا. And I'm not going to disobey you in anything you tell me. That much I can do. Sabr, inshallah. Because that's up to Allah. I'll do whatever I can, but disobedience I won't do. Okay, فَإِنِ اتَّبَعْتَنِي فَلَا تَسَلْنِي عَنْ شَيْءٍ حَتَّى أُحْدِثَ لَكَ مِنْهُ. If you're going to follow me, then here's rule number 1. What's rule number 1? لَا تَسَلْنِي عَنْ شَيْءٍ. What is that? Don't ask me a thing. عَنْ شَيْءٍ, anything. Don't ask me about anything. Could you teach me, please? Yes, I will. Here's your first lesson. Don't ask any questions about anything. That's already testing your patience, isn't it? I came here to learn. I thought, as-su'al nisful ilm. I can't ask questions? But I'm a talibul ilm. What is a talibul ilm without su'als? And then he doesn't even say, by the way, the request was, can you teach me from what you've been taught? And teaching is exhaustive, it's elaborate, it's like prolonged. Allama, the family, prolonged and elaborate, time-consuming. He says, don't you ask me a single thing until uhditha, until I immediately mention, just say, and quickly say, not uhadditha, that would be too long, uhditha, it's the af'ala family. I'll just mention a spurt, like a sentence, minhu, from whatever I'm teaching you, dhikran, some mention. I'll mention some things to you. And then you might ask about the something I told you, but until then, you don't ask a thing. Okay. So you're not going to get exhaustive lectures. You might get a sentence here and there. And even that'll be partial. Deal? So now this is the deal that's been struck. If you look at this passage, this is our second passage, you notice in the first ayah, Musa alayhi salam wants to learn attabi'uka. He wants to follow. And in the last of this passage, if you're going to follow me. Following is repeated in the beginning and the end. In the first he says, you should teach me based on how you've been taught. And in the last ayah, he gives the conditions of that teaching. Don't ask me, I'm going to dictate, and I'll be brief, and I'll just mention something. So they correspond. The first and the last ayah correspond to each other. The middle 3 ayat are all about sabr. So, and in that organization, we're actually learning something. First of all, a student has to trust the teacher. Right? If that trust isn't there, learning won't happen. And once you have that trust, then the teacher might place on you guidelines, restrictions, requirements. He may put rules on you that you're not comfortable with, that you're not used to. But if you have that trust, then you're going to have to follow those guidelines. But at the heart of that relationship, what's going to be tested? Your patience. And that's in the middle. And you may not be capable of that kind of patience, so you must turn to Allah and turn to Allah and say, "Satajiduni insha'Allahu sabiran." But under no circumstances should you be disobeying the teacher. You've entered into this relationship, disobedience is out of the question. وَلَا أَعْصِي لَكَ أَمْرًا. So it's a very beautiful symmetry of sabr in between, and then the relationship between teacher and student on either end of this passage. Okay. فَانْطَلَقَ. What's inṭalaqa? March forward. To move forward. They set off. حَتَّى إِذَا رَكِبَا. Until they both boarded. So who's not there anymore? The intern's not there anymore. He's the intern now. So the duality remains. خَرَقَهَا. They got onto a ship that he cracked. خَرَقَهَا. He tore. He tore the boards open. قَالَ أَخَرَقْتَهَا لِتُغْرِقَ أَهْلَهَا. You tore it open to drown its people? لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا إِمْرًا. You've done something very grave. How could you have done this? قَالَ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ. Very calmly, I just want to imagine this scene. They go down to the bottom of the ship. Thank you for giving us place. We'll be by ourselves for now, thank you, we'll be fine. And he's just ripping it up and water's gushing out. And Musa's like, what are you, they're going to drown. Didn't I say be patient? And then he's just ripping it, Yeah. And somehow Musa alayhi salam is able to hold himself back and say, La tu'akhidni bima nasit. Don't get me in trouble because of what I forgot. Ironically, his intern got in trouble because he forgot. فَإِنِّي نَسِيتُ الْحُوتِ. Remember? وَمَا أَنْسَانِهُ إِلَّا الشَّيْطَانُ نَذْكُرَهُ. And he got mad at him. ذَلِكَ مَا كُنَّا نَبْغِي. This is what we were looking for. What did you do? And then they turned back. And now Musa alayhi salam is in the same exact position. He said, okay, I shouldn't get in trouble because of what I forgot. And don't make things harder for me, please. This was pretty hard, so go easy on me. Now, فَانْطَلَقَا, they move forward. They've done their job, their good deed for the day at the ship. So they move forward, حَتَّى إِذَا لَقِيَ غُلَامًا, until they reach a young boy. فَقَتَلَهُ, so he killed him. قَالَ أَقَتَلْتَ نَفْسًا زَكِيَّةً. You killed a pure person, Zakiyah, because a child is pure. A child is innocent. And Zakiyah means pure because they have no sins on them yet. بِغَيْرِ نَفْس, without any, he didn't kill anybody. How could you have done this? لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا نُكْرًا. You've done something unheard of. The murder of a child. قَالَ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكَ إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. Now the language is tougher. إِنَّكَ أَقُلْ لَكَ. Didn't I say to you? And I have no doubt you can't have patience with me. قَالَ إِن سَأَلْتُكَ عَنْ شَيْءٍ بَعْدَهَا. Okay. This is from Allah. I'm going to back off. If I ask you anything after this, فَلَا تُصَاحِبْنِي. Then don't accompany me. قَدْ بَلَغْتَ مِن لَدُنِّي عُذْرًا. Then you have full excuse that you fulfilled your part and the fault is on my own. From myself, the fault is mine. I wasn't able to be patient. You're right. So if I'm not able to take it anymore, that's all on me. What we're learning now is sometimes the relationship between a student and a teacher goes south. It goes bad. And when it goes bad, and the student's not able to meet requirements, tough requirements were there, and he sat in the teacher's office and said, Inshallah, I'll be, I'll do it. I'll do the work. I promise. And then a couple of weeks go by, and none of that work gets done, or more failures occur, more lapses occur, and at that point, the student is frustrated with himself or herself. But when people are frustrated with themselves, they like to mask that with frustration with everybody else around them. So they said, well, you know what? They didn't give me enough of an opportunity. They're not very good at explaining it to me anyway. They didn't give me enough chances. The weather in Texas really got to me. And the government, Donald Trump did this. Like, somehow, you cannot accept that you were watching Netflix until 2 a.m. You can't accept that. It's the system. It's the government. It's Big Brother who got you somehow. But it's not you. And then it's the TAs, and it's the teacher, and it's the institution, and it's the book. Man, I found a typo in the book. Ugh. Now let me finish season 4. But then decency calls for the fact that you admit where you're wrong, and you say, you know what? If I violate that again, I understand that there are consequences. I'm not going to beg and plead. Musa alayhi salam already recognizes, as tough as it was, he's crossed the line twice. Okay, 2 strikes. There's a 3-strike rule in the Qur'an too, for expulsion, even for prophets. فَانْطَلَقَا, so they move forward until they come to a town. حَتَّى إِذَا أَتَيَا أَهْلَ قَرْيَةٍ إِسْتَطْعَمَا أَهْلَهَا. Some town. Which town? Which town? Oh, come on, no? Okay. That's why it's nakira, some town, so that when somebody asks which town, you say some town. But how come? Because there's a tanween there. Who put Allah there? Istata'ama ahlaha. They asked their people to feed them. What did they ask for food? Probably fish again. No, nobody cares. It's not the point. Ask the right questions. فَأَبَوْا أَن يُضَيِّفُوهُمَا. So they refused to be hospitable to them. Allah doesn't say they refused to feed them. They refused to be hospitable. They wouldn't even open the door. Get lost. Get out of here. Like, they wouldn't even give them time of day. There's one thing, I can't feed you, but there's a tree you could sit under. But they weren't nice at all in any way. They showed no hospitality. فَوَجَدَ فِيهَا جِدَارًا يُرِيدُ أَن يَنْقَضَّ. So they found in it a wall that wants to tip over. Like that. أَن يَنْقَضَّ فَأَقَامَهُ. So he set it straight. فَأَقَامَهُ. And looks like he set it straight by himself. Because if they both set it straight, it would have been فَأَقَامَاهُ. Right? So he, Khidr, is working on his own. قَالَ لَوْ شِئْتَ. And by the way, why isn't Musa helping?
Too busy being patient.
No. No, that's not it. He's scared. He's not going to take a single step until he's told. Because he doesn't know what will get him expelled now. Because he said, if I do anything else, then I'm in trouble. So he's just, قَالَ لَوْ شِئْتَ. Now Musa alayhi salam is, by the way, does Musa alayhi salam, from his personality that you know, does he like to stand by and just watch? So of all the things that kill him is, this man's exhausting himself and he's not sure if he should help or not. And he sees that he's doing all this work and he's done. And it slips. And he's not thinking, this is my third strike. He's just saying, by the way, you could have gotten paid. Like very casually. It's not like, no shit. I mean, they're walking away from the wall. Nah, our job here is done. Those people spit at us, kicked us out. You finished this monument in the middle of the city. We're walking away. And Musa alayhi salam is by this time what? What is he? Hungry. You could have gotten paid. Maybe he even murmured it. He didn't just declare it. I wanted, you could have just gotten paid. And it was registered. قَالَ هَذَا فِرَاقُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. Ironically, they met at a majma'. And then the conclusion is at a firaq. The imagery of the language. They meet where two oceans meet. And now they are going to part. Firaq. بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَكَ. بَيْنِكَ. سَأُنَبِّئُكَ بِتَأْوِيلٍ. I will tell you now, inform you of the interpretation. I will lift the curtain from the unseen. مَا لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ عَلَيْهِ صَبْرًا. Over what you couldn't be patient over. Now, we won't go through the rest of the ayat today, but I will tell you one thing. Musa alayhi salam was with his intern. They crossed a line. And what did they have to do? Come back. فَارْتَدَّ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمَا قَصَصًا. They had to retrace all of their qasas. Now, Khidr is going to retrace the qasas. He's going to retrace the stories, each one of them. So they actually go over each story again. Literally fulfilling now, for the second time, فَارْتَدَّ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمَا قَصَصًا. Step by step. How cool is that? And then at the end of it, ذَلِكَ, what is it? ذَلِكَ تَأْوِيلُ مَا لَمْ تَسْطِعْ عَلَيْهِ صَبْرًا. By the way, you probably did this in Sarf class, but I'll share this with you anyway. Notice that استطاع يستطيع استطاعة الأمر منه استطيع والنهي عنه لا تستطيع. لم would be لم تستطيع. لم تستطيع. And if you notice over here, it is لم تستطيع. Did you guys do this in class? It's لم تستطيع. And the last one is what? لم تستطيع. The ta and the ta are close letters to each other. So the Arabs, for coolness, can actually just say one of them. استطاع استطاع استطاع. يستطيع يستطيع. You could say يستطيع and you can also say يستطيع. They're both acceptable. But that's not enough. Qur'an would not just say, well, this is cool and this is cool, and the intention was to teach you a sarf lesson. Two halals. No. Actually, إِذَا تَكَثَّرَ تَأَكَّدَ. When you say more, you mean more. When you say less, you mean less. Which one is brief in speech? تَسْطِعْ or تَسْتَطِعْ? He's saying goodbye and he's saying there's no reason to elaborate anything anymore. I'm going to be as brief as I can be with you. This is a very quick axe goodbye. تستطع عليه صبرا. We're done. I'm not even going to say a letter I don't have to you. He just cuts it. Subhanallah. He was far more patient actually with him before. ما لم تستطع عليه صبرا. But by the end of it, let's not prolong this any more than we have to. Please take your stuff and go. حدثنا أبي بن كعب عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعد الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Ubay ibn Ka'ab narrated to us that the Prophet ﷺ said, أن موسى قام خطيبا في بني إسرائيل, that Musa عليه السلام stood giving a sermon to the Israelites, the children of Israel. فَسُئِلَ أَيُّ النَّاسِ أَعْلَمُ. So he was asked, who among the people is the most knowledgeable or knows more? Not most knowledgeable, I would say more knowledgeable, right? And a lot of translations make that kind of quick jump and say most knowledgeable. The reason you can't say most is because it doesn't say al-a'lam, it's not superlative. A'lam without the lam ta'rif is comparative, it's not superlative, right? So ana, he said, I know more. And of course this means in the context of among these people, I know more, right? فَعَتَبَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. So Allah reprimanded him, إِذْ لَمْ يُرَدُّ الْعِلْمُ إِلَيْهِ, whereby knowledge was not attributed back to him. This red piece is actually sharh of the hadith. لَامَهُ وَخَاطَبَهُ مُخَابَطَةَ الْإِدْلَالِ وَطَالِبًا مِنْهُ حُسْنَ مُرَاجَعَتِهِ وَمُذَكِّرًا لَهُ بِمَا كَرِهَهُ مِنْهُ. That's all explanation, so I'll skip that part. Okay? That's just from a muhaddith. In any case, إِذْ لَمْ يُرَدُّ الْعِلْمُ أو يُرَدَّ الْعِلْمُ إِلَيْهِ. You guys just did مضاعف, I believe. I was hearing some مَدَّ يَمُدُّ مَدًّا فَهُوَ مَادٌ, right? So when you say الْأَمْرُ مِنْهُ for radda, right? So it will be rudda, ruddi, and urdud, right? So the majzoom version, the lightest version, could be yarudda and yaruddi and yardud. And that's where you find lam yarudda. You see, that's actually a live example of what you guys just did. It could have been lam yaruddi and lam yardud also. All three of those would have been acceptable. Anyway, so as whereby knowledge was not attributed directly to Allah, even in that, and here is a moment of pause for us to understand that the Prophet Musa is not being reprimanded the way you and I get reprimanded. Like if I, for example, say, some obnoxious person asks, Ustad, who knows more Arabic in the room or something? And you say, well, Ustad Adam does. No, you should have said Allah knows better. No. In a given context, you can say who knows more. And clearly he didn't say who's the most knowledgeable. He just said among you, I am more knowledgeable. But prophets have a higher standard than normal people. And even things that are actually completely harmless, for us to say, Allah will hold prophets to account for even those things. And this is actually a way of Allah distinguishing the standards He has for us from the standards He has for prophets. And this is the case even with our Prophet ﷺ. He is reprimanded in the Qur'an, he's corrected in the Qur'an over things that for any other human being would not be a sin. They actually wouldn't be a problem at all. The fact that he frowned at a blind person, for instance, and the word abasa means just a bulge on the forehead. He got frustrated as a blind person kept interrupting him in the middle of a conversation. And by the way, blind people are much better at hearing. One sense is gone, the other sense gets heightened. So he's fully aware that he's in the middle of another conversation. And the Prophet didn't say, stop, I don't like what you're doing, I'll talk to you in a second. He simply developed a bulge on his forehead, which is completely acceptable. By the way, even more acceptable because a blind person can't possibly be offended by a bulge on someone's forehead. That's not even possible. And yet the ayat came down. Right? So they're held to a standard that we're not held to. And this is an example of that. And if you don't keep that in mind, then it just becomes casual. A thought creeps in the minds of a Muslim. Well, prophets made mistakes. They kind of messed up sometimes. No. Hold on a second. They are still ma'soom anil khata. And we have to hold ourselves to that belief when we read the text of the Qur'an too. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I talked to you about Sulaiman alayhi salam ever? Or Dawood alayhi salam? Because when the case of Sulaiman and Dawood comes up in the Qur'an, it makes it seem like they made a mistake. Like it makes it seem like Sulaiman missed a prayer, for example, alayhi salam, because he was taking care of horses. That's the common way that part of the Qur'an, Surah Sad, is explained. Inni ahbabtu hubb al-khayr an dhikri rabbi, right? That I, as opposed to remembering my Rabb, I just took care of the horses. As a matter of fact, that tafsir is rejected by some classic, because I could not there's no authentic narration that says that he missed prayer, first of all. And second of all, from the text of the Qur'an, it's very difficult to just accept that at face value, that he took care of horses and missed salah. And it's even more difficult to accept that because just a couple of ayat before, or the previous ayah, I can't remember, he's awwab. He constantly keeps going back to Allah, repeatedly goes back to Allah. So he's already been described as someone who, like, unusually remembers Allah a lot. And in the very next ayah, we're to assume, based on the words an dhikri rabbi, that he missed prayer. And you know why they say he missed prayer? Hatta tawarat bil hijab. Tawarat, what pronoun is that? Tawarat. She, right? But it doesn't say who she is. So they say until the sun disappeared behind the veil. And they assume it's the sun because it's feminine and the sun is considered feminine. The ayah doesn't say tawarat shams bil hijab. Now tawarat, you guys just did sarf. What pattern is that? Tawarat. Ta'awana, isn't it? What is the feature of ta'awana? Each other. Can you say about the sun, a single entity, each other? The sun with something else. Actually, what he did was, he was taking care of the horses, he made battle horses, he made them march. He made them mush. And they go. And they go next to each other, and they together disappear until he can't see them anymore. Tawarat is used for the horses that he was taking care of, until they went off into the sunset, in a sense. Okay? And actually, the an dhikri rabbi is I love taking care of these horses inspired by my remembrance of my Rabb. I'm actually taking care of these horses because they're going to do the work of the deen. He's doing this fi sabilillah. Hatta tawarat bil hijab. So there's another reading of the same text, which doesn't violate any authentic narration, except it violates what became very popular historically, just a popular interpretation. Yet it retains the integrity of Sulaiman alayhi salam, right? So once you have certain principles in your mind, like the integrity of prophets has to be retained, then the way you read the text becomes different. And the way you question text also becomes different. You know, we don't jump to conclusions about prophets alayhi salatu wasalam. Oh, anyway, there's one more thing about since Sulaiman came up. So when the horses came back, when horses come back and you're a horse trainer, what do? You check on them. You check on them. And they make it sound like he was so upset that he missed salah, that when they came back, or when he went back to the horses, he said, bring me those horses, and he slaughtered all of them. Okay, he slaughtered all the horses. And Imam Razi comments all the opinions about those ayat, you know. فَتَفِقَ مَسْحًا بِالسُّوقِ وَالْأَعْنَاقِ. He began to mash, I won't translate mash yet, by the limb and the necks. By the limbs, the legs, and the necks. Okay? So most scholars say, mashan bis-sikin. He passed over a knife over all of them. He sliced all of them. These horses made me forget my prayer. And then the scholars got into this whole debate about, well, if he slaughtered horses, he must have done this fi sabilillah, to give them as sadaqah, as dhabiha, as, you know, to give out. And because they couldn't fathom that a prophet would just, because, you know, what does it sound like at face value? He became upset and he lashed out at the horses. But, you know, when you mess up, and especially if you miss a prayer, you don't blame anyone else. Who do you blame? Yourself. They say, well, no, he just saw his opportunity to slaughter horses and give them in charity. I'm like, that's not what the text is saying at all. I don't know how you... So Imam Razi said so, and I could not, I don't agree. I read Shawkani, I don't agree. Then I read Ibn Kathir, I was like, I can't agree. I don't know. Ibn Kathir, ya rahimakallah, I really love you, but I just can't. My conscience is not sitting well. I'm going to keep reading. And I keep reading it. And then Imam Razi. And Imam Razi says, I don't agree. I was like, oh, go on. And he says, if mash, the word mash, means to like slice, then you know, what do you do with فَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَيْدِيكُمْ in the Qur'an? Do, you know, when you can't find water, do masah over your heads and your hands. If salat time came, you didn't find water, you know. So I was like, such a gangster, Razi. That was awesome. And then he says, and also when you slaughter in Islam, originally slaughter is an act of mercy in Islam. So the way you slaughter is not by torturing an animal. You slaughter them in the neck. But the ayah says he sliced their legs and then the necks. Why would a prophet torture an animal? Slicing its legs and then its neck. He says then, actually, the horses come back after being exhausted. He pats them on the leg and he strokes them on their neck, which is what you do when horses are exhausted and you're checking on them. It's describing what he was doing. And it's completely consistent with the text. And you don't have to imagine the word sikeen, knife, in the text. Like, integrity of prophets. It's not hard to retain. Just commit yourself to the text. You know? With all due respect to the other opinions. With all due respect. This is more convincing. Wallahu ta'ala. Anyway, so it's another example of that. He said, I know more. And this is sometimes important for a teacher to say. This is also important to defend. You know, if sometimes students are acting obnoxious. Why aren't we learning chapter 7? Why are we learning chapter 4? I know a little bit more than you, just a little bit. I'm not saying I know everything, but can I just teach you right now? Okay, fine. Sometimes you do have to put a student in place. You have to remind them of their place, and he had to do that. And by the way, he's teaching Banu Israel. They kind of have a tendency to get out of line a little bit sometimes. So sometimes they have to be told, Ana a'lam. Just listen, will you? I know. And what kind of question is, Ayun nasi a'lam? What kind of question? You ask a prophet, who of the people is more knowledgeable? If you follow a prophet, isn't the answer to that question automatic? Isn't that a question you don't even need? And when a ridiculous question like that is asked, then you know what? It has to be spelled out. So he's not in the wrong for doing so. Anyway, Allah uses it as an opportunity to take him on a journey. And so, bala. فَقَالَ لَهُ بَلَى. Not at all. لِي عَبْدٌ بِمَجْمَعِ الْبَحْرَيْنِ. Of course, I do have a slave right at the merger of the two seas. هُوَ أَعْلَمُ مِنْكَ. He knows more than you. قَالَ أَيْ رَبِّي وَمَنْ لِي بِهِ. Yes, أي means yes, of course. And also another meaning is E. E and A, similar words. رَبِّي وَمَنْ لِي بِهِ. وَرُبَّمَا قَالَ سُفْيَانُ. Sufyan is the narrator. أَيْ رَبِّي وَكَيْفَ لِي بِهِ. Who is it that I can be with him? How can I get to him? Who is it and how can I get to him? Those are the two variations of the narration. قَالَ تَأْخُذُ حُوتًا. He said, go take a fish. فَتَجْعَلُهُ فِي مِكْتِلٍ. And put him inside a miktil. Miktil means a basket. It's my notes. وِعَاءٌ يَشْبِهُ الْقِفَةِ. حَيْثُمَا فَقَدْتَ الْحُوتِ. Wherever you lose the fish, فَهُوَ ثَمَّهِ. وَرُبَّمَا قَالَ فَهُوَ ثَمَّهِ. Then exactly that's where it's going to be. And perhaps the narrator said not thamma, but thammah, which is an appreciation of how sensitive narrators were. I can't remember if he said thamma, or was there a little H at the end of when he was saying thamma, and he said thammah. So he says, since I'm not sure, I'm going to say, I think I heard Sufyan say thamma, but he may have said thammah. Now, وَأَخَذَ حُوتًا فَجَعَلَهُ فِي مِكْتَلٍ. So he took the fish and he put it inside the basket. ثُمَّ انطَلَقَ. So then he marched forward, he went ahead. وَهُوَ وَفَتَاهُ يُوشَعُ بْنُ نُونٍ. He and his young assistant, his young lad, Yusha, the son of Nun, Yusha ibn Nun, which the Bible calls Joshua. That's the biblical Joshua. حَتَّى إِذَا أَتَيَا الصَّخْرَ. Until they approached the boulder. So they approached this large boulder. وَصَغَارُ رُؤُوسَهُمَا. This is saga is a separate word, or should be sa'a? Sorry. وَضَعَ رُؤُوسَهُمَا. They placed their heads on the rock. Like they leaned at it and they just kind of passed out. Okay? فَرَقَدَ مُوسَى. So Musa woke up. وَاضْطَرَبَ الْحُوتِ. And as he woke up, startled, the fish actually it got disturbed. تحرك مع أنه ميت. The narrator or the muhaddith is actually explaining, it started moving despite the fact that it's dead. وقيل كان مشويا. It's also been said that it was roasted already. It was already roasted fish and it just kind of started moving and فخرج. So it left. فسقط في البحر. So it fell into the sea. فاتخذ سبيله في البحر سربا. Then it took into the sea a path that looked like a mirage. I'll skip the... And it made a small opening, kind of like, the wake. It made a wake. So this makes it seem like they were, in fact, the narration makes it seem like they were walking inland, and then it jumped into the beach. Okay? فَأَمْسَكَ اللَّهُ عَنِ الْحُوتِ جِرْيَةَ الْمَاءِ. So Allah held the fish on the flow of the water, meaning the fish didn't jump into the water, it went on top, like a jet ski kind of thing. So Allah held it on the surface of the water. فَصَارَ مِثْلَ الطَّاقِ. So it went like a spear, like it went forward like a spear. وَهَذَا مِثْلُ فَقَالَ هَكَذَا مِثْلُ الطَّاقِ. So and then the narrator says this is what a spear looks like, and he started kind of demonstrating visually. And so they say he did some visual demonstration, and they put that in the narration as well. فَانْطَلَقَا يَمْشِيَانِ بَقِيَّةَ لَيْلَتِهِمَا وَيَوْمَهُمَا وَيَوْمِهِمَا actually should be. Anyway, so they both started moving forward. They went ahead, they didn't realize the rest of their night and the next day too. So 2 days worth, like a whole 24 hours worth of travel, they continued. حَتَّى إِذَا كَانَ مِنَ الْغَدِ, until time came of the evening, early morning. قَالَ لِفَتَاهُ, he said to his young lad, آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا, bring us our lunch. لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. This is directly from the Qur'an. We've met with quite a bit of exhaustion. وَلَمْ يَجِدْ مُوسَى النَّصَبْ حَتَّى جَاوَزَ حَيْثُ أَمَرَهُ اللَّهُ. And Musa did not meet with any exhaustion until he had way past where Allah had commanded him to be. In other words, Allah did not give him any sense, any inclination that he's passed beyond where he's supposed to be. قَالَ لَهُ فَتَاهُ. So his young lad said to him, أَرَأَيْتَ إِذَا وَيْنَا إِلَى الصَّخْرَةِ. Did you see when we took refuge towards the boulder? فَإِنِّي نَسِيتُ الْحُوتِ. Then I had forgotten the fish rather. وَمَا أَنْسَانِهُ إِلَّا الشَّيْطَانُ أَنْ أَذْكُرَهُ. And none but shaitan made me forget to mention it at the time that the roasted fish actually woke up and took off. وَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ عَجَبًا. Now that I think of it, it did take a really strange way into the sea. What's ajab about a fish in the sea? When it's dead, two, it's on the surface, not under. You know, it's going, you could see it going. فَكَانَ لِلْحُوتِ سَرَبًا وَلَهُمَا عَجَبًا. So the fish actually looked unreal. For the fish, there was this mirage-like looking wake that was there, and both of them found it strange. By the way, this hadith saying lahuma ajaban suggests that Musa saw it too. Because it's not lahu ajaban, it's lahuma ajaban, right? And that further corroborates ara'aita, didn't you see also? Because the Fata, Yusha, is talking to Musa alayhi salam, suggesting Musa saw the fish take that road too. But Allah made them not remember, and then he attributes that to shaitan. تعجبا من أمره لأنه خارق للعادة. This is sharh, so we won't go into that. قال له موسى ذلك ما كنا نبغي. Musa said, that is what we were in pursuit of. فارتد على آثارهما قصصا. So they retraced their remnants, their footsteps, step by step. قصصا means step by step. رجع يقصان آثارهما. So they came back, tracing their steps. حتى انتهيا إلى الصخرة, until they ended up at the boulder where they originally were. فَإِذَا رَجُلٌ مُسَجًّن مُغَطَّى بِثَوْبٍ. Mughatta is the sharh word. So when they saw a man completely wrapped up, enveloped in a garment, فَسَلَّمَ مُوسَى. So Musa said salam to him. فَرَدَّ عَلَيْهِ. So he responded to him. فَقَالَ. And he responded to him by saying, وَأَنَّا بِأَرْضِكَ السَّلَامِ. And how do you people say salam where you come from? You just say salam, you don't introduce yourselves? So the man kind of was a little bit aggressive and said, this is it, this is all the salam you guys do where you come from? Anna bi ardika salam. And notice he doesn't say, wa anna bi ardikuma as-salam. It's as though Musa alayhi salam has already grabbed the Fatah and said, let me do the talking. And now he's getting put in his place a little bit. Qala ana Musa. I said, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. I'm Musa. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Musa. I'll introduce myself properly. Qala Musa bani Israel. Musa from the children of Israel. Musa of Bani Israel. It's a mudaf ilayh. Musa bani Israel. Okay? Typically a proper name is not used as a mudaf, right? But you know in Old English, I am David of Camelot or something. You know? So they use of instead of from. Like nowadays you say, I'm Mike from Chicago. Like, you know. But you don't say I'm William of Dallas. Like, you know. You don't do that, you say from, but in old Arabic and old languages you use a lot of, right? So, Musa of Bani Israel, قال نعم أتيتك لتعلمني مما علمت رشدا. I came to you so you could teach me from what you've been taught in terms of uprightness and guidance. قال يا موسى. He said, Musa, إني على علم من علم الله. I am committed and I'm committed to knowledge from within the knowledge of Allah. علمنيه الله لا تعلمه, that Allah has taught me that you don't know. So when they saw a man completely wrapped up, enveloped in a garment, فَسَلَّمَ Musa, so Musa said salam to him, فَرَدَّ عَلَيْهِ, so he responded to him, فَقَالَ, and he responded to him by saying, وَأَنَّا بِأَرْضِكَ السَّلَامِ, and how do you people say salam where you come from? You just say salam, you don't introduce yourselves? So the man kind of was a little bit aggressive and said, this is it, this is all the salam you guys do where you come from? أَنَّا بِأَرْضِكَ السَّلَامِ. And notice he doesn't say, وَأَنَّا بِأَرْضِكُمَا السَّلَامِ. It's as though Musa alayhi salam has already grabbed the fatah and said, let me do the talking. And now he's getting put in his place a little bit. قَالَ أَنَا Musa. I said, oh, okay, I get what you're saying. I'm Musa. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Musa. I'll introduce myself properly. قَالَ Musa bani Israel. Musa from the children of Israel? Musa of Bani Israel, it's mudaf ilayh. Musa bani Israel. Okay? Typically a proper name is not used as a mudaf, right? But you know in Old English, I am David of Camelot or something. You know? So they use of instead of from. Like nowadays you say, I'm Mike from Chicago, like, you know. But you don't say I'm William of Dallas. Like, you know, you don't do that. You say from. But in Old Arabic and old languages, you use a lot of. Right? So, Musa of Bani Israel, قال نعم أتيتك لتعلمني مما علمت رشدا. I came to you so you could teach me from what you've been taught in terms of uprightness and guidance. قال يا Musa, he said, Musa, إني على علم من علم الله. I am committed and I'm committed to knowledge from within the knowledge of Allah. علمنيه الله لا تعلمه, that Allah has taught me that you don't know. Allah has taught me that you don't know. وَأَنْتَ عَلَىٰ عِلْمٍ مِّنْ عِلْمِ اللَّهِ, and you are committed to knowledge, some knowledge, from within the oceans of knowledge of Allah. عَلَّمَكَهُ اللَّهُ لَا أَعْلَمُهُ, that Allah has taught you that He hasn't taught me. I don't know it. Which means Allah has given you Tawrat, Allah has given you revelation. I haven't received that revelation. But Allah has taught me some other things that you've never learned. قَالَ هَلْ أَتَّبِعُكَ, so He says, can I follow you? قَالَ إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا, you're certainly not going to be capable of patience with me. وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا, and how can you be patient over something you haven't encompassed, you don't have full news of? In other words, I was telling you before, his assessment of Musa alayhi salam is that he cannot be patient over partial information. Okay? Which goes back to actually one of the earlier incidents in the life of Musa alayhi salam too. All the information isn't there, and he became upset at the Israelite being attacked by the Qibti, right? And he took action, and he wasn't able to bear just standing there and watching, right? Anyhow, so the narrator says from here, لم تحد به خبرا قال ستجدني إن شاء الله صابرا ولا أعصي لك أمرا فانطلقا, all of that until they wrecked the ship. He recited all of that. The Prophet recited all of those ayat in this place. فانطلقا, so they moved forward. يمشيان على ساحل البحر, walking along the coast of the sea. فَمَرَّتْ بِهِمَا سَفِينَةٌ, so a ship passed by them. كَلَّمُوهُمْ, they called out to them, spoke to them. أَنْ يَحْمِلُوهُمْ, that they can be boarded on. Can we board on to your ship, guys? فَعَرَفُوا الْخِضْر, so they recognized Khidr. This is the first time we're hearing his name. So they recognized Al-Khidr. فَحَمَلُوهُ بِغَيْرِ نَوْلٍ, so they let him board on without any nawl. Nawl means compensation, any fee. Okay. فَلَمَّا رَكِبَا فِي السَّفِينَةِ جَاءَ عُصْفُورٌ, so when they boarded onto the ship, a bird came, a sparrow, literally a sparrow came. فَوَقَعَ عَلَى حَرْفِ السَّفِينَةِ, so it sat at the very edge, at one of the bottom edges of the ship. فَنَقَرَ فِي الْبَحْرِ نَقْرَةً أَوْ نَقْرَتَيْنِ, and it pecked into the ocean once or twice, like dipped its beak in the water once or twice. قَالَ لَهُ الْخَضِرُ يَا مُوسَى, so Musa alayhi salam, Khidr said to Musa, ما نقص علمي وعلمك من علم الله إلا مثل ما نقص هذا العصفور بمنقارة من البحر. The knowledge you and I have from within the banks of knowledge of Allah hasn't diminished what Allah still has with Him that we don't have, except like this, the droplet that this bird has just pecked from the ocean. That's all we have. So now, the story began with I know more, right? And now he's met someone who knows more. And the one who knows more says, put together we know nothing. put together, we really don't know anything. Okay? And there's this humility that's coming with knowledge. I'm reminded of Shah Waliullah Dehelwi's famous quote, rahimahullah, when he would graduate students, he would tell them the same thing every time. He would say, when a tree bears fruit, its branches lower. When a tree bears fruit, its branches lower. And his way of taking, when you've acquired knowledge, which is fruit, that it should actually bring you humble, should bring you down, not bring you up. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us of those. So he says, we don't really know anything. إِلَّا مِثْلَ مَا نَقَصَ هَذَا الْعُصْفُورِ بِمِنْقَارَةٍ مِنَ الْبَحْرِ all of a sudden, so now there's this sweet spiritual lesson. We don't know anything except this little droplet. There's this imani kind of experience, and out of a sudden, he grabbed the axe, فَنَزَعَ لَوْحًا, and you know where the bird was, right at the brink, where the water is? So you know the ship is like shaped like this. So the front of it is called the qaddum, from quddam, the very front. That's where the water gushes and hits against the ship, right? So he says immediately he grabbed the axe and he yanked out a board. قَالَ فَلَمْ يَفْجَأْ مُوسَى. Musa was not even shocked yet. إِلَّا وَقَدْ قَلَعَ لَوْحًا. So he didn't know, why is he axing the board? Maybe he's doing something I don't understand, maybe some new kind of salah, I don't know what he's going to teach me. He's still not surprised yet, but once he axed it, he loosened it, he yanked it out. And it's at that point that Musa alayhi salam, it hit him, what's he doing? What is he doing? So, وَقَدْ قَلَعَ لَوْحًا بِالْقَدُّمْ فَقَالَ لَهُ مُوسَى. Musa said to him, مَا صَنَعْتَ? What have you done? قَوْمٌ حَمَلُونَ بِغَيْرِ نَوْلٍ. A group of people let us board onto their ship. They didn't even charge us anything. عَمَدْتَ إِلَى سَفِينَتِهِمْ. You had evil intent to destroy their ship. عَمَدَ, to purposely do harm to something. عَمَدَ. Ta'ammud actually means intentful behavior, right? So you intentionally did this to their ship. فَخَرَقْتَهَا لِتُغْرِقَ أَهْلَهَا. You damaged it so you can sink its inhabitants or the people on board. لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا إِمْرًا. You've done something really terrible. Imr, one of the words in Arabic for terrible. We'll get into it when we go ayah by ayah. قَالَ أَلَمَّ قُلْ إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. Didn't I say that there's no doubt about it? You're not going to be able to bear patience with me? قَالَ لَا تُؤَاخِذْنِي بِمَا نَسِيتُ. He said, don't take me to account over what I forgot. وَلَا تُرْهِقْنِي مِنْ أَمْرِي عُسْرًا. And don't lean on me and be difficult on me in the decision that I made. فَكَانَتِ الْأُولَى مِنْ مُوسَى نِسْيَانًا. So the first excuse that Musa alayhi salam presented in his defense was forgetfulness. The first line of defense was forgetfulness. فَلَمَّا خَرَجَا مِنَ الْبَحْرِ. Then when they both came out of the sea, مَرُّوا بِغُلَامٍ يَلَعْبُوا مَعَ الصِّبْيَانِ. They passed by a boy that was playing with other little children. فَأَخَذَ الْخَضِرُ بِرَأْسِهِ فَقَلَعَهُ بِيَدِهِ هَكَذَا وَأَوْمَأَ سُفْيَانَ بِأَطْرَافِ أَصَابِعِهِ كَأَنَّهُ يَقْطَفُ شَيْئًا. This is part hadith, part describing how Sufyan narrated the hadith. He visually explained what was happening. He said he grabbed the kid by his head and he moved his hands out like this and he just plucked like he was plucking something. Like he yanked the kid's neck and snapped his neck. That's what he did. It's very disturbing. And then فَقَالَ لَهُ مُوسَى قَتَلْتَ نَفْسًا زَكِيَّةً بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ. What have you done? You killed a pure person, a pure soul, without him having committed murder. You've done something completely unheard of. قَالَ أَلَمَ قُلْ لَكَ إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. Didn't I iterate to you that no doubt you are not going to be able to bear patience with me? قَالَ إِن سَأَلْتُكَ عَنْ شَيْءٍ بَعْدَهَا فَلَا تُصَاحِبْنِي. He said, if I were to ask you anything after it, don't accompany me. قَدْ بَلَغْتَ مِن لَدُنِّي عُذْرًا. You have now reached whatever udhr, whatever excuse on my end, you are fully justified in letting me go, basically. That's what udhr means. Udhr in Arabic, not just used for excuse like al-ma'adhiru makadhib. I'm reminded of the words in Surah Al-Mursalat, udhran aw nudhra, right? Those words are very powerful because Allah takes an oath, right? He takes an oath by winds, winds that do different kinds of things. Winds that can pluck trees out of the earth, and then winds that bring clouds. And the contrast is that winds can kill and winds can give life, right? And as a result, winds are a means for human beings to reflect that the creation and the gifts Allah has given you can be a source of your destruction and can be a source of your benefit. Water is life, but water can kill. Wind gives life, wind can kill. Revelation, if benefited from, gives life. Revelation, if disregarded, will kill. Allah says, like a narration says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَرْفَعُ بِهَذَا الْقُرْآنِ أَقْوَامًا وَيَضَعُ بِهَا آخَرِينَ أو بِهِ آخَرِينَ. Because of this Qur'an, Allah raises some nations and puts some nations down. That's because of the word of Allah too, right? So, as a result of that, He says, فَالْمُلْقِيَاتِ ذِكْرًا. As a result, these winds, they always bring you into contact with something to reflect on, something to remember. And then He says, عُذْرًا أَوْ نُذْرًا. And عُذْرًا there specifically, as enough of an excuse of a case against you. Meaning whatever happens to you after winds were sent to you, on Judgment Day, if no revelation was sent to you, nothing else was given to you, Allah has the right to ask you, didn't I give you wind? Wasn't that enough to ponder on? That was enough of a case against you. عُذْرًا. That's actually the implication of عُذْرًا in that ayah. وَعُذْرًا أَوْ نُذْرًا. So when Musa a.s. says عُذْر, he's saying, you've got all the justification you need to expel me from this university. Right? أعذرك في مفارقتي لأنك بلغت النهاية في التنبيه. فانطلقا. So they moved forward. حتى إذا أتيا أهل قرية استطعما أهلها, until they approach the inhabitants of a town where they both seek food from them. استطعما أهلها. يعني طلب منهم الطعام ضيافة. They asked for some food from them just out of hospitality. فأبوا أن يضيفوهما. So they refused to show them any hospitality. فوجد فيها جدارا يريد أن ينقض. So they found in it a wall that wants to tip over. مائلا, tipping. Now مائلا is his comment. وأومأ بيده هكذا. Then they say that Sufyan made a gesture, or the Prophet made a gesture so-and-so. وَأَشَارَ سُفْيَانْ كَأَنَّهُ يَمْسَحُ شَيْئًا إِلَى فَوْقُ. And Sufyan made a gesture as though he is passing his hand over something above him. Like a wall that wants to tip over. I imagine he did something like this. Okay? Now, فَلَمْ أَسْمَعْ سُفْيَانْ يَذْكُرُ مَائِلًا إِلَّا مَرَّةً. But I've heard Sufyan say this story multiple times. I've only use the word ma'ilan, leaning, only once. So the narrator is even sensitive enough to say, by the way, he only used the word ma'il that one time. But I figured I should write it in. قَالَ قَوْمٌ أَتَيْنَاهُمْ. Musa alayhi salam said, a group of people, we approached them. فَلَمْ يُطْعِمُونَا. They didn't give us food. وَلَمْ يُضَيِّفُونَا. They weren't even very hospitable to us. عَمَدْتَ إِلَى حَائِطِهِمْ. You purposely went towards their wall, and you intentfully, with full consciousness, built it up for them. لو شئت لاتخذت عليه أجرا. Had you wanted, you could have been compensated for it. You could have taken from because of it some compensation. قال هذا فراق بيني وبينك سأنبئك بتأويل ما لم تستطع عليه صبرا. This is the parting between you and myself. I will now inform you of the interpretation of what you couldn't bear patience over. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وددنا أن موسى كان صبر. Musa alayhi salam said, we wished that Musa alayhi salam remained patient. فَقَصَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا مِنْ خَبَرِهِمَا. So Allah would have told us more about what happened with them. So Allah wanted to know more. And what's really beautiful here, خَبَرِهِمَا, some attribute this to, we could have learned more about their journey and they could have learned more. And some say that the hima here refers to the two kids, like he wanted to know about their well-being. The khabarihima, because I wanted to know what happened with those children. أي ما قد يقع منهما أكثر مما ذكر. What more could have occurred? قال سفيان قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يرحم الله موسى لو كان صبر لقص علينا من أمرهما. May Allah show mercy to Musa alayhi salam. Had he been patient all along, actually, we would have been told much more from their affair. They could have spent a lot more time together, and he could have learned a lot more. One of the morals of the story from the hadith perspective is that a student will lose patience, and when they lose patience, their journey to learning more will be cut short. They could have benefited a lot more, they could have gotten a lot more, but their temperament kept them. So it's not only one's intelligence and one's capacity to learn and memorize and internalize that plays a role in one's journey in learning, but also one's temperament. One's patience with their teacher, and one's ability to accept, look, I don't understand everything. And if you tie the themes of the story as narrated in this hadith together, you come away with some very beautiful conclusions. In the beginning, you're told that everything we know is just a drop in the ocean, right? But when you see things you can't understand, at that point to remember, I cannot fully comprehend what's happening here because what I know is a drop and the reality of this is the ocean. Right? At that point, it's hard to remember. At that point, I saw what happened. I know what happened. How could this be the case? Like at that point, you don't want to accept that you don't know the whole story. It's too difficult to see something, to have some knowledge, and accept that you don't know everything. That's really, really hard to do. In my last khutbah, Colleyville, I actually spoke along these lines. It's another, and that's more, it's not even about learning, the journey of learning, but about passing judgment, which is related, right? You don't know the entire story. There's always somebody who knows more, even if you've seen something happen in front of your eyes. And that's why even the ayah, فَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ, above everybody who possesses knowledge is somebody, a knowledgeable one, right? And a fully knowledgeable one. Alim could be about kamal, fully knowledgeable. Someone who has the full story. That is part of the ayah in which Yusuf alayhi salam had hidden the cup in his brother's bag. And he had done so, if you didn't know the whole story, you would think he schemed, he lied, he conspired, he falsely arrested. Like there's a lot of bad conclusions you'd arrive at. And don't say Yusuf, put somebody else in his place and say one of the students put one of their wallets in somebody else's bag and got them arrested. You would not find that to be an acceptable course of behavior. We would all pass judgment, don't try it. As an attempted tafsir of the ayah. Please don't try that. But if you did do that, it would be really easy to say, this is what happened. And if somebody says, you don't know the whole story, yeah, you're always saying you don't know the whole story. It's on camera. We saw it. We know what happened, So when you see something, it's just too hard to accept. I don't know what's behind the scenes. I don't know what prompted this behavior, And that's kind of along the lines of what happens in this story. What's happening in front of him is so intense, it is at that time to just take a step back and say, I need to take this in and not react. And the last thing I'll tell you is from a thematic perspective, because we'll go ayah by ayah next. I gave you the story's overview last time and this narration today. One thematic thing I want to share with you, how is this connected to the fitan? Because the surah is connected to the fitan of the future, the trials that the ummah will face in its future. One of the most difficult things that the ummah will have to learn is to face harsh realities. And every time we face them, we're going to say, why is this happening to us? What's the point of this? This is so unfair. And we're going to get overwhelmed with grief and frustration. And it is at those points that we're going to have to say, just like the mentor to Musa alayhi salam was telling him, you just don't have enough patience to bear. You're just, you see an injustice around you and you just question immediately, why is this happening? We need to fix this right away and take action right away. Hold on. You need to understand that when these fitan are happening, and the Prophet ﷺ would describe towards the end of times, the blood of Muslims is going to be shed, and injustice will be widespread. And as a result, by the way, because of this injustice, I can't believe this happened in my own lifetime. When I was first learning about Surah Al-Kahf in the 90s, right? In the 90s when I was first learning about it, one of my teachers told me, that a time will come, the Prophet would describe, a time will come where people will be, because of these fitan, his analysis was because of these fitan, people will start questioning their iman altogether. Like things on the Muslims will be so difficult, somebody might even come along and say, if we were really on the committed to the truth, and Allah is on our side, all of this wouldn't be happening to us. I don't even want to be Muslim because all of these things that are happening to us. And I could not imagine when that would ever be the case. Like, things are bad, but it ain't that bad. Come on. That things are going to be bad and people are just going to say, I don't even want to be Muslim anymore. Things were like, I don't want to tell people I'm Muslim because I want to fit in. There used to be that. I don't want to look too Muslim. There used to be that. But I don't want to be Muslim. I couldn't imagine. Now when you say this, you don't have to imagine. You just have to open your email inbox. It's crazy. This happened within no time at all. No time at all. Subhanallah. So it's a real thing. It's a real thing that somebody's faith gets challenged when they see a lot of trials around them. And the first remedy to that in this particular piece of the surah is humility of knowledge. Just one recognizing I don't understand everything and being content with that. and not losing patience over that. May Allah Azza wa Jal make us among the patient and among those who Allah continues to open the doors of wisdom for. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Assalamu alaikum. What I'm going to do today, inshallah, is a little bit unique. I'm going to be going through some of my notes that are also done in collaboration with a student of mine, mashallah, a brilliant student, Sharif Rundawa, who studies Near Eastern traditions and their relationship with the Islamic tradition. So a lot of times the stories that are mentioned in the Qur'an, we're familiar with the stories as they are in the Qur'an, but are there other cultures, other traditions that have similar stories and parallels? And this is important to understand, especially when we're teaching Islam in the West, because the point of view that people have that study Islam, not non-Muslims that study Islam, is very different from our point of view, right? I don't agree with their point of view, but I have to understand their point of view. So here's their point of view. Their point of view, obviously, is that the Qur'an is not the book of Allah. Let's start with that. That is not their point of view. Their point of view is that the Qur'an is a mix of different kinds of folklore and traditions and stories, and that the Prophet ﷺ, of course, to them he's not a prophet, is just a very creative person, right? Who's taking bits and pieces from all these different traditions and stories and meshing them together, right? So one of the most interesting peculiarities in Western studies into the Qur'an is actually the story of Musa and Khidr. The story, of course, Khidr is not mentioned by name in the Qur'an, is mentioned in the Hadith by the Prophet ﷺ. But the story itself and the journey and what occurs in the journey, all of this is very fascinating to them, because in Jewish tradition, of course, the Jewish tradition has a lot more on Musa than the Qur'an does, right? There are four out of the 5 books of the Old Testament are dedicated just to Moses, right? But they have nothing of this. There is no mention of any journey, any person named Khidr, or anywhere remotely that close. So what that makes them say is, well, this must be a confusion of the Muslims, of the early creative writers of the Qur'an, etc., etc. That's how they kind of mesh it together. And what they say is this actually has to do with the story of Gilgamesh and some other previous legends, in which there is a fish that goes off into the sea. So they'll see parallels that have been mentioned in other folklore somewhere, and say, since there's a parallel, this must have been borrowed from that other legend or that other story, right? And that's the formula. And it sounds very convincing to somebody who, it's actually not, first of all, it's not convincing. All it is speculation at the end of the day. Speculation that, look, I found another story in a completely different book somewhere, a mythical text somewhere, that has similar elements to the story that's in the Qur'an. That must mean that the story in the Qur'an was inspired from over there, okay? Our take on this, of course, begins with the fact that we're not looking to prove that the Qur'an is the word of Allah. The word of Allah is in and of itself mubin, in and of itself bayyin. It's actually self-evident to us, right? And my study in the Qur'an, your study in the Qur'an as believers, begins with the assumption that this is the perfect word of Allah and it's the absolute truth. That's what it begins with. Okay. So even though it's peculiar that these parallels may be found, the only way we think about it actually is that Allah Azza wa Jal speaks absolute truth. And He, like He said in the beginning of the story, everything okay? Like He says in the beginning of the story, even when He was telling the story of the people of the cave, نَحْنُ نَقُصُّ عَلَيْكَ نَبَأَهُمْ بِالْحَقِّ إِنَّهُمْ فِتْيَةٌ آمَنُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ وَزِدْنَاهُمْ هُدًى. We're going to tell you the story accurately. Allah says He's going to tell it accurately and purposefully. Haqq also means purposefully, okay? And also haqq means He's the only one who has the right to tell the story accurately and purposefully. Now that He's established that precedent, every other story He's going to tell, it's as though He's the only one who has the right to tell it. As if to say others don't really know what happened. Nobody else really knows what happened. Only Allah Azza wa Jal does. Which is a unique feature of this surah, because all of the stories mentioned in this surah have an atmosphere, an air of ambiguity. You don't really know everything, right? And it reinforces the idea that only Allah truly knows everything. And you're going to have to relegate that trust before Allah. But what I'm going to do today, inshallah, is share some things with you from my notes about how this story is paralleled with other stories in the same surah, and how themes are being built, how some of the themes are being built. So even though, inshallah, we'll do one more run of the story later on, I'm just going to run through these dry notes, inshallah. So the story obviously centers around Musa alayhi salam. There are similar elements found in Christian literature from Alexander Romance and other Near Eastern lore. but it is completely new from them. So some people's theory is that the Qur'an takes bits and pieces from these other places and then makes a new story altogether. By the way, this happens with Musa alayhi salam in particular several times in the Qur'an. So Musa alayhi salam in Surah Al-Qasas, Allah talks about when Fir'aun was making fun of him, he called his general Haman and he said, build me a tower. Build me, لَعَلِّي أَبْلُغُ الْأَسْبَابِ أَسْبَابَ السَّمَاوَاتِ. So, كَيْ أَطَّلِعَ إِلَى إِلَهِ Musa. I want to reach the God of Moses. Because the idea was, well, Musa went to a mountain and spoke to a flame, and through the flame he spoke to God. So why don't you build me a fire and a tower, and I'll make my own mountain, and I'll go up there and talk to God myself. I don't need to go to Musa's mountain, I can make my own. I have that kind of clout. Ironically, the pyramids are also shaped like mountains. Right? But anyway, so he was mocking. Of course, this isn't found in Jewish literature. This claim that the Pharaoh said, build me a tower, is not found in Jewish literature, except it's found in a completely different story in the book of Xerxes, Esther actually, a king named Xerxes. The legend of the story is called the Tower of Babel. You may have heard the term. The Tower of Babylon or the Tower of Babel, right? And that's where the king says, build me a tower, I want to go speak to God. So then they claim, well, obviously, this man, meaning Muhammad, we say sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they don't confuse the two stories together, jumble them together. And that's how these kinds of claims are made. And this is a very standard approach to studying Islam in the West. Okay, I personally am not shaken by it at all. I find it funny because Allah tells the stories accurately, and obviously He established that there are things that we're never going to know, and only Allah Azza wa Jalla is going to know. So where are these parting of the seas, and who is this young man with Musa Islam? Yusha, some say, right, alayhi salam, that they're both prophets, and then they meet Khidr, which comes in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But anyway, one of the first interesting thing that sticks out is إِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ, when Musa alayhi salam said to his young man, to his young lad. And this is not the first time fitya or youth is coming up in the surah. Where did it come up before? So you have in the beginning young people that have no mentor, they just have each other. And by contrast, now you have young people that are on a quest, or a young person who has a mentor, who has someone guiding him, and he's taking instructions from, right? So it's actually pretty interesting that both of those scenarios are highlighted. You'll notice also a parallel in that in the first case, young people are fleeing. They're fleeing from something. And in this case, these two are running towards something. They're not getting away from something, they're heading towards something. Anyhow, لا أبرح حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين أو أمضي حقبة. I will continue, I won't stop until I reach مجمع البحرين, the meeting place of the two seas, or I spend ages doing so, right? So he's very committed to reaching this place. This is interesting because there is no mention of the words insha'Allah. And we've already established very recently in the surah, لا تقولن لشيء إني فاعل ذلك غدا إلا أن يشاء الله. Right? So, does he reach this place? Yeah. Does he pass the place? Yeah. So, and then later on, he actually recognizes it. So every time he speaks, he says, سَتَجِدُنِي إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ صَابِرًا. So inshallah actually then comes back. And of course, you'll also notice that before Allah mentioned, when the ayah of inshallah came, Allah said, وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيت. Mention your Rabb when you forget. And you'll find in this story, نَسِيَ حُوتَهُمَا. They forgot the fish. فَإِنِّي نَسِيتُ الْحُوتِ. I forgot the fish. And they both forgot their fish. So forgetting and then being reminded later on, right? That's actually something. And then of course, even as the story progresses, the instruction was one instruction. Don't ask me anything. What does Musa alayhi salam keep doing? Forgetting. لَا تُؤَخِذْنِي بِمَا نَسِيتُ. Don't hold me to account for what I forgot. So forgetting and remembering, and inshallah, a theme already established in the surah now recurs and is reinforced in a completely fresh light, right? The word al-Bahrain could be a reference to Dhilmun, which is modern Bahrain actually. It's possible that it's a reference to that. In Mesopotamian tradition, especially in the story of Gilgamesh, which is whatever altered story there is, it actually refers to the place that is actually literally called al-Bahrain nowadays. Now, فلما بلغ no, I'm missing it. لا أبرح حتى أبلغ مجمع البحرين أو أمضي حقبة فلما بلغ نسي حوتهما بينما نسي حوتهما فاتخذ سبيله في البحر سربا. The word بلغ
which is to reach, interestingly creates an anchor to reach somewhere. Because in the next story, which is the story of Dhul Qarnayn, you're going to find balagha again. So what Allah does in this story, not only are there parallels to previous stories, by the words Allah chooses, fitya, fata, right? There's an anchor made. Dhikr and nisyan, there's an anchor made, something established with the previous story. But what also is going to happen with the next story is that Allah Azza wa Jalla will mention where Dhul Qarnayn reached. Where he reached, wherever he reached. And now again, reaching is being mentioned, right? Hut, that's a side note, but in the Alexander romance, Gilgamesh and all these other stories, the fish is very important. And whatever Arabic was translated, the word hut was used there too. Another interesting thing in this particular story is the word sabil. وَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ عَجَبًا سَرَبًا, right? Sabil. And you'll find the word sabil make its way again in the story of Dhul Qarnayn. It's going to be mentioned again. So these anchors are important because they create a kind of a connection. Inshallah, when we do get to the story of Dhul Qarnayn, then we'll revisit where was sabil used in the story of Musa, and where's sabil being used in the story of Dhul Qarnayn, and what could possibly tie these two things together. Because by using these words, Allah literally ties things together. He connects words that are the same and builds those bonds in our mind, right? فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَا قَالَ لِفَتَاهُ آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا. When they passed it, he said to his young lad, give us our food. We're exhausted from our journey. لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. Interesting parallel to the first story. Is there hunger and getting food in the first story also? Isn't there? The young people get hungry when they wake up, and then they say, and by the way, the miraculous thing happened to them, and they didn't realize it, and then they said, bring us food. And in this story, a miraculous thing has happened. They actually passed the place we were supposed to pass, and when they were passing it, a fish jumped out of the thing, and it did happen. And they didn't realize it, and then they got hungry later and asked for food. So there's actually a direct parallel between the story of the people in the cave and the story of Musa alayhi salam in that sense also. لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. Interestingly also, not only did the young people, when they actually pursued the food, is when the story moves forward. And here, it's when they go and back in pursuit of the food, which is the fish that ran off, that's when the story moves forward and everything unravels, things become clear. Also an interesting parallel, إِذْ أَوَى الْفِتْيَةُ إِلَى الْكَهَفِ. What did that mean? When the young people, in the story of Al-Kahf, the cave, the youth of the cave, when they took refuge into the cave. And here, أَوَيْنَا إِلَى الصَّخْرَةِ. They took refuge towards a boulder. So there's another parallel. They're taking refuge there, and they're taking refuge here. One of the most interesting things here is وَاتَّخَذَ سَبِيلَهُ فِي الْبَحْرِ عَجَبًا. It took its path in the sea in a strange way. عَجَبًا. This is not the first time عَجَبًا is used in the surah. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, أَمْ حَسِبْتَ أَنَّ أَصْحَابَ الْكَهْفِ وَالرَّقِيمِ كَانُوا مِنْ آيَاتِنَا عَجَبًا. Allah does miracles for young people, and it's not something out of the ordinary for Him. Did you really think it's that strange? And now Allah Azza wa Jalla is showing, not only when people are fleeing persecution, like young people standing up for their faith, fleeing persecution, impossible odds, they don't know where to escape, Allah will miraculously aid them, and it's not a big deal for Allah. Now in a completely different context, not running away from something, running towards something. Now they were running away from persecution. What are Musa alayhi salam and his young assistant running towards? What are they journeying towards? Knowledge. And when you're running towards knowledge, the beautiful theme is, when you're running towards knowledge, then Allah will open miraculous doors for you. And it's not very strange for Allah to do. Amazing things will happen when you pursue that journey. So young people are described in these two very different circumstances. This young lad, in the beginning of the story, running away from bad things, and here running towards a good thing. And in both, miraculous things are happening for them. SubhanAllah. So the word عَجَبًا makes another appearance. Then قَالَ ذَلِكَ مَا كُنَّا نَبْغِي فَارْتَدَّ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمَا قَصَصًا. That is what we were pursuing. And so they retraced their steps. They retraced their steps. And the word for their retracing their previously left steps is athar. Athar. Is athar making its way the first time into the surah? No. فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ. Are you going to kill yourself in grief over the athar? Now it's amazing that on the one hand, Allah talked about people that believe Allah has a son. Right? And they say this, مَا لَهُمْ بِهِ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. They have no knowledge of this. So what they leave behind, they live a life that is based on something that is no knowledge. There's no knowledge. And so they leave steps behind. And now there are people who are learning. They're on their path to learning. They also leave steps behind. And sometimes as a student you will make mistakes and you'll have to retrace your steps. Which is amazing. When you're alive, you can still take back the steps you made. Once you're dead, you know, the steps that people have taken, the ramifications of it can't be undone. But while you're still alive, you can actually retrace your steps. You can go back and undo the damage you may have done. There's still hope for you, right? So what the Christians had, يُذْرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ وَلَدًا. You know, those who have already said Allah has taken a son, they've established that precedent of shirk. What a tradition they've left behind them, all the ruin that's come in their wake. Are you going to kill yourself in grief over the destruction that's come as a result? That's on the one hand, it's too late. And on the other hand, you've got two people who realize they crossed a line they shouldn't have crossed, they went too far, and they cut to come back. So the word athar is actually playing it on that theme, subhanAllah, just by its recurrence. فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا. So beautiful. They both found us, one of our slaves, who we had given rahmah, a special rahmah from. If you go back to the first story, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ rahmah. Master, give us, especially on your behalf, give us some kind of special mercy and care. And now, almost in the same wording, آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا. We had given to him a rahmah that comes especially from us. What Allah is teaching us again is, Allah decides who He gives His rahmah to, it only comes from Him. If you have a good life, if you have knowledge, if you have the reputation, put this in perspective. Actually, I mentioned this in the khutbah I gave a couple of weeks ago, it was so awkward, man. I was giving a khutbah. I was about to give a khutbah. I went to this masjid for the first time in Toronto, and they decided to do like a full-on introduction of how honored they are that I'm there. And it was so awkward. It was so... Brother Nouman is extremely knowledgeable. I was like, oh God. I was just making istighfar that lightning doesn't strike, because this is a place where only Allah should be glorified. There are no needs for introductions. And so I decided, I changed my khutbah altogether. Because it was so bad. I did it out of love. I acknowledge that. I'm not hating on them or whatever. They did it out of love. But I felt the need to remind myself and others. Musa alayhi salam is actually the most knowledgeable human being at the time. He is. And I told you before, when people asked him, Ayyun nas a'lam, well, who of the people are the most knowledgeable? Or who knows more? Sometimes you have to put students in their place. He wasn't saying it out of arrogance, but when you're dealing with dumb students, then the teacher has to say, listen, I know more than you, shut up. There are times where you have to do that. Oh, are you the teacher now? You have to do that sometimes, when students are getting out of hand. And of course, the students are Banu Israel. So they kind of have a history of getting out of line a little bit with prophets. And they've been with him for a long time. And then they ask what question? Who's more knowledgeable? Oh my God, it's Musa alayhi salam. Why would you ask that idiotic question? Why would you ask that? These people are clearly obnoxious in the way they're asking that question. And Musa alayhi salam puts them in their place. That's not the point. The point is, Allah makes him travel to meet Khidr. And this person has not received Torah. This person, whoever he is, has not received the revelation that Musa alayhi salam has received. Allah has given him some knowledge. And clearly, from an Islamic perspective, the most inspirational figure in the Qur'an, most mentioned, most talked about, most revered, most repeated, is who? Musa alayhi salam. And so to us, he is one of the biggest teachers in history. And now we're learning a story in which that teacher becomes a student. Yes or no? So if Musa alayhi salam in the Qur'an is the great teacher, and now we're learning even he has a teacher, the amount of reverence we have for Musa alayhi salam is actually dwarfed by the amount of reverence we're supposed to have for someone who Allah considers even Musa's teacher. And so how should this amazing honor, the incredibly knowledgeable human being, that the Kalimullah, Musa alayhi salam, should go learn from him. Man, Musa alayhi salam has the opportunity to speak to Allah directly. And he should go learn from him, Allah says. But understand the status of the person he's about to go meet, right? And then once you understand that, figure how Allah describes him. عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. That's the description in the Qur'an of Khidr alayhi salam. Some slave from among our slaves. That's it. Not even al-abd. Not even lamut ta'rif, not even proper like the slave. He meant like the ultimate slave of Allah. No. Not even Abdullah in Idafa, which would mean the slave of Allah. No. Abdan, some slave. Oh, let me qualify that better for you. Min ibadina, from the other endless ocean of slaves that we have. What should knowledge do? It should humble. What should knowledge do? It should make you, the more knowledge you have, it should make you realize I am just a slave among other slaves. I have no ranking like that. And the greatest rank you can earn actually is, that's one of the most amazing things about the Qur'an. I find it absolutely fascinating. You know, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, his ascension to the heavens, is important because up until then, the highest a human being had reached is the top of a mountain to speak to God, which was who? Musa alayhi salam. But now Allah Azza wa Jalla has decided that a human being will travel the heavens, and meet Allah in a place where even the angel Jibreel can't go. He's going to go there. Which means no human being has ever reached a higher ranking than our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. No human being's ever reached that status. Both literally and figuratively, no one's been higher. You understand that? And when Allah speaks about that ascension, every time He speaks about it, the Prophet is called Nabi, Prophet. He's called Rasul. He's named by name, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's called Ahmad. He's called Muzammil. He's called Muddathir. The couple of times Allah mentions the ascension, you know what He calls him? Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi. Fa'awha ila abdihi ma awha. What does He call him? A slave. The ultimate position of learning from Allah directly. From Allah directly. It's not even Allah sending something down to you. Now He calls you up to Him. And in that position, the highest honor you can earn is literally the lowest term a human being can ever use for himself, slave. So when you go back now and rethink about the story of the people of the cave, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً. One of the biggest mercies a human being can have. You know, on the one hand, if they are on a path to escaping oppression, is protection. That's protection from outside enemies. But in this journey, in the journey of knowledge, the enemy is not outside. Where's the enemy? Inside. You still need rahmah from Allah. آتِنَا مِن لَدُنْكَ رَحْمَةً آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا. The rahmah given to him is his humility. As a matter of fact, I shared with you what he said to Musa alayhi salam, right? And the last time, you've been taught what I don't know. I've been taught what you don't know. First thing he acknowledges what he doesn't know. And as a matter of fact, first he acknowledged what Musa alayhi salam knows. What he knows and what he doesn't know. This is a rahmah from Allah for someone who's learning to acknowledge that they don't know. To acknowledge that they're still on the path. To acknowledge that they might sometimes cross where they were supposed to go and they went the wrong way and then they have to retrace their steps. Right? This is important because you know when you learn, and by the way, Musa alayhi salam has an assistant next to him, a student next to him. How easy is it for a teacher to admit they're wrong? It's hard. Oh, yeah, that was wrong. That wasn't right. Wait, let me correct myself. It's hard. It's embarrassing. Then the shaitan comes and says, your student is going to think you don't know what you're talking about. You're not really that good of a teacher because you're supposed to know everything all the time. You know? And they say, yeah, well, maybe I did. And then instead of admitting that you're wrong, you say, well, you know, it's complicated. And you start, you know, doing a political speech about how there are circumstances in which this might be acceptable or stop, just admit you're wrong. I didn't know. You know what? Oops. Yep, that was wrong. Cool. I do this all the time with students. I not admit I'm wrong. I make them feel bad for pointing out my mistakes. You know, I'll write, I have to say like sky, and I mistype it as shy or something. And then someone's like, that, it says shy on the thing. And I'll retype it as sky and say, no, read carefully. The sky. Batameez. You know? As a joke, that's fine. But you know what? It's okay to admit your mistake. It doesn't reduce anything from you as a teacher. So that's a little bit about that, that one, rahmatan min indina, how a new light has been shined on it. The rahmah of Allah from outside threats and the rahmah of Allah from the inside, the nafs inside of us that needs to be put into check. May Allah keep all of us in check. Then of course the key words, when he says, قَالَ لَهُ مُوسَى هَلْ أَتَّبِعُكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُعَلِّمَنِي مِمَّا عُلِّمْتَ رُشْدًا. Could you teach me from what you've been taught in terms of uprightness? مِمَّا عُلِّمْتَ عِلْمًا رُشْدًا. Ilm and rushd have been tied together now. Knowledge and guidance have been tied together, which is an important distinction. Rushdan here, you can even say, is a kind of tamyiz. Particularly from all the knowledge that you have, knowledge that sets you in the right direction. Such a beautiful word, tying all of what we've learned in this surah together. Listen to this carefully. You can learn a lot of stuff, but you won't have direction. You can learn a bunch of stuff and you have no direction. You can have, there are people who are nerdy and they have information about all kinds of things. All kinds of things. Sports, technologies, fun facts, the states of all the the capitals of all the states, all kinds of stuff, but no direction. By the way, this happens even inside Islamic studies. You can know all kinds of stuff. You could know all the ikhtilafat of how to pronounce this word in the qira'ah of Hafs according to per narration. You can know it, and that's awesome knowledge. It's really cool, especially at a party. But if we lose sight that all of that knowledge is supposed to lead us in a particular direction, and knowledge in and of itself is not a goal. Its goal is to better give you direction. Direction was your goal. Knowledge was just a means to get to that goal. Think of knowledge like a map. The purpose of a map is not for you to go in every street. The purpose of a map is just as much of which streets to avoid and which street to stick onto. And if you do take a wrong turn, at least you have a map, which means you can make a few turns and come back on track. فَارْتَدَّ عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمَا قَصَصًا. In the study of Qur'an for myself, Qur'an is supposed to be the book of direction. It's supposed to be the book that guides you in the right direction. In the study of Qur'an itself, I can get lost in technicalities and i'rab and nahu and sarf and the root analysis of a word or the 80 different opinions about this one ayah or whatever, and lose sight of the fact that I was actually studying this because I wanted direction in my life. That's what I was learning it for. Not so I can collect quotes and get all ilmi on people. Because people like doing that. Like talibul ilm, I'm going to go talibul ilm on you now. I'm going to quote a bunch of stuff. And most of it I won't even translate, partially because I don't know what it means either. Don't lose sight of direction. Don't lose sight of direction. So it's so beautiful that Musa alayhi salam adds that qualifier, rushdan. It ties the previous stories together, especially the first one, the story of the people of the cave, because people lost sight of what's the point of this story. Let's just argue how many they were. Let's just argue how many years they lived. You're missing the point. You're just missing the point. So don't miss the point. And by the way, that's the temptation here again, isn't it? Who is Khidr? Is he really green? Where is this place? Is it really Bahrain? I'm still going to Bahrain to learn now. No. That's just some side commentary. It's okay. Get back on track. Just get back on track and don't lose focus. Okay? قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا وكيف تصبر على ما لم تحط به خبرا. The theme of sabr is a special theme in this story. Sabr means what? Patience, perseverance, right? In this story, sabr is made dependent on the recognition that Allah knows the unseen. This is an important lesson. It's very succinctly said here. Sabr is dependent on how well you recognize that Allah owns the unseen. When do we become impatient? Things that happen, that we experience, that we can see, that we can feel, that we can touch. What gives us the strength to be patient through those experiences? There are other things happening that are in the unseen world that you can't see or feel or touch. For all the bad that you're experiencing, there's something good that's happening. The easiest example of that, that's so evident in the sunnah of our Messenger that I can give you, it's so beautiful, is when you visit somebody sick. They're in pain. They're experiencing pain. They're not able to do what they were once able to do. They're bedridden. They can't, some simple pleasures that like sitting up and eating they can't enjoy, right? Going out and taking a walk they can't do anymore. And you go to this person, and the prophetic words are la ba's, tahur inshallah. No problem. Purifier, inshallah. Purify. Wait, no problem? All I see is problems. No, in another world, in another reality, a reality you can't see, this is actually not a problem at all. In the grand scheme of things, this is nothing. And then on top of that, your body is actually contaminated. Your body is to be cleansed of an internal contaminant that is keeping it from being healthy. And health and purity go hand in hand. And the exact opposite words, no, this is a purifier. Yeah, it's purifying your sins, it's purifying some other mistakes, it's purifying trouble that if you were healthy you would have gotten yourself into. It's purifying things from your life that you did not want, you did not need. You know, this is the idea of sabr. You missed a flight, you got on the airport, and you got a security line was super long, and you get to the gate, and sorry, you just and they close the gate in front of you as they watch you running. Can I get on? No, the gate's closed. But you were making eye contact with me as you closed the gate. You were... No, but it's closed. It's a policy. Once we close the gate, you can't get on. And then she gets a message on the walkie-talkie. There's a few seats over here. It's Jersey. So, but it's closed. And you're upset. How come they didn't let me on this flight? Oh, God, this is so horrible. You know, etc., etc. Actually, maybe there was some evil for you on that flight. You don't know. You don't know if you landed early, something bad was going to happen to you on the way home. Some accident you avoided that now you were never even on that road because you came home 3 hours late the next morning. Something Allah planned, averted from you. We look at the scene and we lose our patience. The entire purpose of the story is to know that there's something. Allah always has a better plan in the background. You will experience things that agitate you, that you don't understand, that I don't understand. But we have to rely that Allah has something better planned for us. That's the lesson that's being taught. And so sabr is actually the lesson learned. That's why it keeps making its appearance again. And that's why, lahu ghaybu samawati wal ard. By the way, even before, about the unseen, Allah alone owns the unseen of the skies and the earth. Rajman bil ghayb came before, people making assumptions about the unseen, throwing stones in the unseen. Now, this was actually particularly important for the Sahaba because the Sahaba were going through a lot of trouble at the time. Like this is a Makki surah, they were being persecuted. Things did not look good. But Allah Azza wa Jal has something working in the background. Something's happening that they don't realize. Like I'll give you one more example of this even if it takes the rest of our time. One of the hardest examples to process if you don't recognize this is sometimes in the Qur'an, the Prophet ﷺ is criticized. Like Abasa wa Tawalla, the Prophet's criticized. He frowned, he turned away. Abasa, he bulged on the forehead and he turned away. Right? And how is this a good thing? How is a critique of the Prophet ﷺ a good thing? Or actually the story I just recently taught, the story of Aisha radiallahu anha, how she was slandered. How the most noble woman, this woman did more good. I want you to understand the pressure on this woman, this young woman. A fourth of the traditions of the Prophet ﷺ would not make their way to us if it's not for our mother Aisha. She has one of the most noble tasks, noble responsibilities ever given to a woman in history. And yet, and she is one of the most revered, respected, regarded figures in Islam. In Islam. And yet, Allah put her through, I cannot imagine a more humiliating experience. To be in that profile as she is, and to be accused of cheating on her husband, and to be accused, and her husband being the messenger of Allah, and then if that's not bad enough, people from within her own family buying into it. People from within her own family. And this lasting over the course of a month. That experience, what she went through, is so horrible. It's so bad. This is, and by the way, from the Shari'i perspective, the accusation made against an innocent woman that itself should be whipped. A person who makes such an accusation or even insinuates something like that, right? They should be whipped. And yet, how did the Qur'an describe it? He says, لا تحسبوه شرا لكم بل هو خير لكم. Don't imagine it to be something evil that happened for you. Rather, it's something good for you. خير لكم. How is that good? It's good in the unseen. But I can tell you some things we can see now that couldn't have been seen then. Until the day of judgment, are there going to be innocent women that are slandered? Innocent people whose reputations are ruined by people's words, by people's casual comments and remarks? Yes, there are going to be people like that. And until the day of judgment, those people will receive their strength and will know that their honor has not been tarnished because of the words Allah gave to Aisha radiallahu anha. She had to go through that for all the people until the day of judgment that are going to experience that. They wouldn't have consolation if it wasn't for her. And they'll know, because when people say those things about you, one of the first thoughts you get is, maybe I'm a bad person. If all the people are saying this, I must be a bad person. So, and she's so awesome. She says, when she tells the story herself, she says, radiallahu ta'ala anha, I didn't think I was worth Qur'an coming down for me. And she chooses such beautiful words because now she knows she's worth it. Now she knows Allah made her worth it. And so what Allah does is, if the most honored of people can be humiliated like this, who am I? It's okay. Who are you? It'll happen, and Allah will still, Allah is the one who gives the dignity, Allah is the one who restores it. So, وَالْهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ is good for you. That is the lesson that's been reinforced in this surah over and over again. Anyhow, قَالَ سَتَجِدُنِي إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ صَابِرًا وَلَا أَعْصِي لَكَ أَمْرًا. Again, you'll find, I'm going to be patient, but this time he recognizes, insha'Allah. I'm going to be patient, inshallah. You're going to find me to be patient, inshallah. And the wijdan, finding, is another theme that recurs here multiple times. فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا سَتَجِدُنِي إِنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ صَابِرًا. Right? Finding is going to be something that occurs over and over again. And finally, I'll reinforce something I said before. Actually, no, I'll go to something new. The pattern, the structure, one of the structural things about this story, and then inshallah, probably next time, I'll share with you like an ayah by ayah lessons of this story, inshallah. Is فَانْطَلَقَ حَتَّى إِذَا. When you say, how are each piece of the story structured, first they come upon something. The first part is, they come upon something. Then Khidr alayhi salam does something shocking. Like they came upon the ship, and what did Khidr do? He tore it up, right? Or they came upon the child, and he killed him, etc. Then the third part is always Musa alayhi salam questions, why did you do this? How could you do this? And then the fourth part is always Khidr reminds him. Reminds him of what? He doesn't explain what he did. He simply reminds him, didn't I tell you you're not going to be patient? Which means Musa alayhi salam keeps forgetting. And by the way, did he say inshallah? He said inshallah. Just because you say inshallah doesn't mean you'll remember. Right? وَاذْكُرْ رَبَّكَ إِذَا نَسِيتَ. Remember your mention when you mention your Rabb when you forget. So he keeps reminding him, and then Musa alayhi salam responds apologetically until at the very end Musa alayhi salam explains his actions, or rather Khidr alayhi salam explains his actions and says, okay, this is the reason behind this and this and this and this. Interestingly enough, the word dhikr, a play on words. حَتَّى أُحْدِثَ لَكَ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا. This is the last thing I'll share with you. حَتَّى أُحْدِثَ لَكَ مِنْهُ ذِكْرًا. Until I make mention of anything for you. The word dhikr in Arabic is reminder. It's also mention. And in the beginning of the story, Khidr said, look, you have to follow me, and you can't ask me any questions. لا تسألني في شيء حتى أحدث لك منه ذكرًا, until I make some mention of it to you. So the word dhikr in the ayah is used in the meaning of mention. Isn't that clear? But interestingly, thereafter, the mention, because of Musa alayhi salam's nature, because of him not being able to handle what's going on around him, it was never ever anything mentioned. Everything was actually reminder. So the word dhikr, which was supposed to be mentioned, turns into what? Reminder, because that's what Musa alayhi salam needed more. Between nisyan and dhikr. So the duality of both meanings is very nicely captured. Sometimes people just need a mention, other people need a reminder. Some students, in learning, some students you can say something to them and they get it. Other students, please, let me repeat that again. Oh, could you say that again? Yeah, I can say it again. Okay, just one more time. I think I'm getting it. And that's okay. A teacher shouldn't get annoyed. They should just repeat. They should just repeat. They should just repeat. And that's okay. Sometimes for some people, that's how learning works. For other people, you say one time, I got it. You don't have to say it again. I got it. So may Allah Azza wa Jal make us good students, inspired students by the Book of Allah. Hopefully, inshallah, by next time we wrap up the story of Musa and Khidr. These were just some outside notes before we dive into the ayah by ayah. Barakallahu li wa lakum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.